I talked very highly about Bad Batch last week. Maybe not very highly. It's good. It's more Clone Wars, like you said, Clone Wars 2. You get characters from Clone Wars and Rebels. It kind of becomes a thing that they do now where it's a cameo fest, but you get more D. Bradley Baker crushing it as all the clones, Rekka, Tech. He doesn't do Omega. That's somebody else. I forget her name, but it's a young girl or a woman. But if you liked the family aspect of Rebels and the actiony war tale of Clone Wars, it's kind of like a merging of those two things.
Yes, that I would tend to agree with. And Bad Batch, I think, is pretty good. The only complaint I have about Bad Batch, and you and I disagreed on this last week, is how much they devoted the last season of Clone Wars to setting this up as an offshoot. They wasted a lot of episodes that they could have used to really wrap up that story arc better than they did, because they wasted a lot of episodes of that last season of Clone Wars that they brought back.
Yeah, I mean, they could have. I think they wasted way more time with the Rava.
Absolutely.
Rafa, and I forget her sister's name, but those people that show up in Bad Batch.
Yeah, because they got to reuse them.
Yeah.
They spent all that time animating them, so.
Especially that with, this is it, Ahsoka's back, and, we see where Ahsoka's been, and then she's hanging out, there's, wacky adventures with these two sisters. It's why?
And that was it almost felt like an extension of Forces of Destiny, the way that it went down. That's really what it felt like.
The stuff with the Bad Batch, like I said, we talked about it last week, but those episodes were, basically already scripted and made and blocked. So I think that they were in there because, we had already shown the fans this, and people are going to expect that if we're going to give it the full budget that this final season got, which is why it looks awesome. In terms of visuals and animation quality, it's a huge step up.
See, and the problem that I have there is you're retconning. Okay, the Bad Batch.
They're like X-Men.
Right. How were they never mentioned before? They come into Clone Wars with this reputation of being the A-Team. And you've never seen them before. You've never heard of them before. They don't show up on any kind of news feeds, nothing. They just come in with this reputation.
Well, this is what happens
when you're supposed to believe it.
When everything's a prequel and we never move forward. When we're constantly backtracking to fill in gaps, this is what's going to happen. It's inevitable. When the movies are the blueprint and then we try to fill in every possible second of the timeline with new characters, there's just not a whole lot you can do.
And I get that, and I accept it. I just don't like it.
We tried moving forward, and no one liked that. So,
well. All right, so let's take a quick break, and we're going to come back and kind of do a recap on Happy when we come back. We'll be right back. For over 7 years, the Second Sith Empire has been the premier community guild in the online game Star Wars: The Old Republic. With hundreds of friendly and helpful active members, a weekly schedule of nightly events, annual guild meet and greets, and an active community both on the web and on Discord. The Second Sith Empire is more than your typical gaming group. We're family. Join us on the Starforge server for nightly events such as operations, flashpoints, world boss hunts, Star Wars trivia, guild lottery, and much more. Visit us on the web today at www.thesecondsithempire.com. Welcome back to Insights into Entertainment. We are talking Disney and things. Star Wars mostly, but everyone starts out in Disney at some point.
Yeah,
right?
the large looming shadow of the mouse.
So 10 years in, since they've owned it, and we're talking about where they came with it. And the other person who seems to be the man of the hour with resurrecting Star Wars and keeping it going is Jon Favreau, who started out with Disney back in 2008, directing Iron Man and portraying Happy Hogan in Iron Man. And he had a rather storied career with Marvel. What are your candid thoughts on Jon Favreau?
Yeah, I looked ahead at the notes and I saw that we were going to talk about Jon Favreau. I'm not a big Jon Favreau guy. I don't think he's that talented of a director. I think he's, I use the phrase Disney hack off air, maybe. But I like Iron Man, the first one. He also did a movie called Chef. That's pretty good. He stars and directed that. Those movies are good. I don't know. You look at, we have the list here. Iron Man 2, no one likes that movie. Jungle Book, the 2016 remake, The Lion King 2019 remake. Both of those movies just felt like such, corporate kind of cash grabs, especially Lion King. Because
the live-action remakes that were 99% CGI.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, that's a whole nother thing. They're not live action. They're just not. They're animated, okay? Just because it looks like a real lion, which it doesn't make it live action. They didn't, cast a lion. It doesn't matter. The Lion King especially was a personal offense to me because I'm a big fan of the original movie, and the new one was just so, I didn't watch it, so you can disregard my opinion if you like, but it's just so soulless, and I think it's the epitome of Disney as a corporate machine, and I think Jon Favreau is on the front of that face of that.
Because they didn't have the songs in it, that's why.
They only have 4 of the songs, and they redid them and they were awful. Anyway, I'm sure Jon Favreau, he made his money. He's a very successful guy, and I'm happy for him for that.
Happy, I get it.
Yeah.
So what about producing? So producing, he did pretty much everything with Marvel so far. He's been involved with Avengers, Iron Man, Infinity War, Endgame, Age of Ultron. Do you think that his hand with Marvel has been worthwhile? Has he contributed to it? Has he detracted from it? They keep him in it, so he must be doing something right.
Yeah, I think in a lot of ways he's similar to Filoni, where if you look at a lot of behind-the-scenes stuff, and, it's all manufactured, so take it with a grain of salt anyway. But Favreau seems like he is a fan of the Marvel source material, and when he gets to stuff with Star Wars, he seems like he's a fan of that source material too. And even if he is, the corporate shill I make him out to be, even if he's
don't hold back. Tell us how you really feel.
Even if he's a little bit of a fan, that's going to translate at some point. He's not someone that's totally unfamiliar with these properties, coming in trying to shoehorn it into whatever story he wants to tell. He respects the source material, and he has also, he's found a way to adapt it to a whole new audience. So there's credit there.
So as a fan, he did participate in Clone Wars as the voice of Pre Vizsla.
Yeah,
which actually he told an interesting story about this. He was on set doing some post work for Iron Man 2 at the time, and was invited to come in and do the voice for him. And all of a sudden, he adopts that persona, moving forward in the shows. Then they bring him back in for Mandalorian. Now, everyone kind of really got juiced about Jon Favreau because of what he did with Mandalorian. What are your thoughts on? Obviously, you're not a huge fan of his Marvel work or his other Disney movie work. How is he now with Star Wars?
I'm a big fan of Mandalorian. I talked about that last week. It's I think it's the best modern Star Wars thing to come out of this whole, the acquisition and everything. I think it's the most promising thing going forward of what we can do with this universe. And it's, Favreau's been a big part of that. And, I give him a ton of credit for that, because it's kind of like what he did with Iron Man, where, this is the guy for this universe going forward. And we're going to center things around him and have that property be the thing. And I think Favreau's good at that. And I think he did it again with Star Wars. So
now, did you ever get a chance to watch the Disney Gallery documentary on the Mandalorian?
I did not.
That's worth watching, because he hosts it and he kind of does all the interviews with all the other directors. Because remember, Mandalorian Season 1 was directed by 5 different directors.
Yeah.
So it wasn't him directing everything. He was really the showrunner for it more than anything.
Okay, so I was thinking of something else. I did watch a couple of these. I didn't watch all of them, but I did watch a couple of these episodes. Because I remember that's where you get a lot of the cool behind-the-scenes stuff that I...
Yeah.
So those were fun to watch, especially hearing the Filoni one. I remember being really good, because he talks about you get, he's just a fan. So it's 2 fans just talking about Star Wars.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do remember those now.
And I have to say, that's probably where the magic really happens, is each of these guys alone bring an element that's contributory towards the success. But I think the 2 of these guys together as a team are what really have made this what it is. Filoni kind of had this early on when he had that mentor-mentee relationship with Lucas, and he was kind of like the Junior George type thing. But I think the relationship that Favreau and Filoni have together is more, they play off of each other's strengths, and I think that's really where a lot of that value comes from. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, especially if it's, if Favreau is more of the business side of things, having a background in producing and directing and, having a foothold in the corporate world of things at Disney, for better or worse. I think that could be an asset when you've got a creative like Filoni that can do the writing and the story blocking and things like that. Putting those together, that's how you get things made at the end of the day. So,
and I think ultimately that's where we're kind of at with the situation here that we're at now. I mean, we've got Book of Boba that was a collaboration between the two of them, which that was probably not the best thing that came out of it up until about episode 5?
Yeah, whenever the Mandalorian showed up.
when Mandalorian season 2.5 started. The one thing I think that we get from the two of these guys is that we don't get from the movies that we saw, the sequel movies, is there's an appreciation for the history and for the legacy. They're constantly trying to put little pieces in to connect it back to the original series. I went crazy when the Mandalorian lands on Tatooine in season 1 and the little red R5 droid comes out with the scorch marks from the blown motivator from A New Hope. And I pointed it out when we were watching it to the rest of the family, and they're like, oh yeah, whatever, you're just sort of making this up. And then in the documentary, he talks about that specifically.
Oh, really?
Yes.
That's cool.
And he insisted that they actually paint that on there so that you would be able to tell that that was where he came from.
Yeah, speaking of Tatooine callbacks, in the 2.5 episode of Boba, he gets the souped up Naboo starfighter that's like a hot rod,
right?
Which is like so dumb, but I fell for it. Like, it was so cool. And then you see it flying next to X-Wings, and it's like the merging of prequel and original trilogy stuff that, I think is really neat. And there's just so much potential that if they would just kind of capitalize on, and like what I imagine the Mandalorian will do, moving the story of Luke forward, moving the story of Ahsoka forward, things like that.
Yeah.
But, moving forward with things. Well, I guess for Luke, he's still, we see where he ends up, but the Luke that we all wanted.
Right. Well, and it's funny you mention that because even that scene where they're putting the ship together, he goes to the Jawas and they have to go get some kind of stabilizer, or I forget what it was called, but it's the bar that they used in the trash compactor scene in A New Hope. It's the same exact thing, and they did that just so you had that visual reference to the original trilogy. And it's like the fact that they go out of their way to do stuff like that, I think to me shows their appreciation for it. But it's that little bit of fan service.
I do think you can go too far with that. That's how you get a Solo where it's like the dice.
I agree.
But, at least that the people doing it in Mandalorian actually care, because you see the behind the scenes stuff and, it's not like as in your face.
If it's subtle. If it's subtle and it's there to provide accent to the scene or context to where you are or something like that,
And it can make the universe feel more connected, I guess. Too.
Exactly. Yeah. When you do something like a Solo, or even what J.J. Abrams did, as much as I want to say that Force Awakens was the best of the sequel trilogies, it still wasn't a very good movie, and it was really there for fan service, just for fan service, for the sake of fan service.
Yeah,
it was basically a remake of A New Hope, and they even make fun of it. Like in the movie, they're making fun of, oh, there's got to be a way to blow it up. There's always a way to blow it up. Like, lines like that are kind of, it's that slap in the face that where you're going over the top.
Yeah.
All right, so I got a giant Death Star with a big laser. Oh, well, this is what the original Death Star looked like, and this is what, so it's a bigger Death Star. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's like, that was too much. Seeing an R2 or an R5 droid that I recognized and thought, wow, that would be awesome if it was the one from A New Hope, and it turned out to be the one from A New Hope.
Yeah.
There wasn't a plot, line around it. There wasn't a twist to it. There wasn't dialogue around it or anything. It was just there.
We didn't get a 6-episode miniseries about the droid dealing with...
Right. The droid didn't get his own series like everyone else seems to get.
Coping with the blown motivator.
So, anyway, but I think the bottom line here is that while they each bring their own to the equation here, I think the two of them together is really where that creativity is benefiting the franchise.
Yep, absolutely.
So we're going to take a second break here. We'll come right back, and we're going to talk about the future of Star Wars.
Insights into Teens, a podcast series exploring the issues and challenges of today's youth. Talking to real teens about real teen problems. Explore issues from braces to puberty, social anxiety to financial responsibility. Each week, we talk about the topics concerning today's youth. We look at how the issues affect teens, how to cope with these issues, and how parents, friends, and loved ones can help teens handle these challenges. Check out our video episodes on youtube.com/insightsintothings. Catch our audio versions on podcast.insightsintoteens.com or on the web at insightsintothings.com.
So the future of Star Wars under Disney. So they had a ton of announcements at Celebration. I watched a bunch of the panels. Couldn't go because it was in Anaheim and, flying and all that stuff and pandemic and Corona and all that. But I found when we were down at Orlando, it was better to watch it on YouTube anyway because you can't get close to the stage for anything. So they announced a bunch of things, and some of these we already knew were coming out. So the first one that we have to talk about here is Star Wars Rogue Squadron, which was announced back in December of 2020. It was going to be a Patty Jenkins movie. Then she was on again, off again, on again. She's got Wonder Woman that she's working on. A whole kind of thing. And it almost smelled a lot like Solo, where we're having problems keeping directors again for some reason. Rogue Squadron still scheduled for a 2023 theatrical release, but it's not clear if they're going to keep that, especially with Taika Waititi's film moving forward that we'll talk about in a little bit. Do we need a Rogue Squadron film?
No, I think my thesis for this part is I talked about it last week, but I've kind of fallen off the movies and TV shows, and I think this is like the peak of that. No, we don't need a Rogue Squadron. If you're going to do it, it should have already came out, and it should have ripped off Top Gun. People would have been way more invested if that's what they did. If I had to guess, I'd say they're probably going to make it a TV show now, because what was it, Kathleen Kennedy, they said they're moving away from movies and they're moving into television?
That was, they did, but they did because they announced a whole bunch of movies at Celebration.
Oh, okay. I didn't check any of that stuff out, but no, I don't think we need that. I never was really into the whole Rogue Squadron thing. I never was really into the games because they were, flying games. I was never into them. They had the new Squadrons game that was fun. Very complicated though, and again, it's just I don't know the flying thing as a topic never really interested me.
It was a great series of novels. I have to say I did enjoy the novels themselves, and they had a Rogue Squadron video game that came out in the, I want to say, 90s or so, somewhere in that time. But none of the storylines from those books or that game is going to be included in this, from what they said.
Awesome.
So it's going to be something completely new. So next we have a movie that's to be determined. It's a standalone movie from director J.D. Dillard, who did the 2016 sci-fi hit Slight. No details about this. The fact that he got his own movie, because apparently everyone's getting a Star Wars movie now. Not only do you get an offshoot of a series if you're a character, you get your own movie if you're a director and apply for it at this point. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm sure our letter's in the mail.
Yeah. I'm waiting for our invitation to come do our own. Because the next one that we have to talk about is another one that's to be determined, and that's a Kevin. How do you pronounce his name?
I was looking up J.D. Dillard. Kevin Feige.
Feige. Okay. So Kevin Feige is also getting his own standalone movie.
Okay, people were jazzed about that. He's the Marvel guy, so
he's the Marvel guy.
I mean, he is. He's like, again, we talked about it off air, but you don't want to point fingers at one person for everything wrong or everything right with a franchise. But Kevin Feige seems like he's the one that is like he steps in and he says, "Hey, let's do this to make the MCU a cohesive universe." And it's weird they're giving him only one movie, but
Well, and that's the thing. Like, he's not. Why is he?
Has he directed before?
I don't know. If he's the Marvel guy, why is he doing a Star Wars.
Okay, it's Disney. They own everybody. Let me look up Kevin Feige and see if he's directed. That could be interesting, though, if he, does it right. I don't know. Did they give any information on what it could be about?
No, there aren't a lot of details or any details at all. They talk about him being the man who built the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Yeah.
There was a 2020 conversation in The Hollywood Reporter from Joe Russo, the Endgame director, where he talked about Star Wars in Kevin's debut, and he thinks he's going to do great at it, blah, blah, blah.
It's mostly producer credits on his IMDb, but there's so many of them that I'm having trouble finding anything else. There's 67 of them, and I can't figure out how to sort. So, maybe, he did his time at Marvel. Maybe he wants a shot at directing a Star Wars film, and that's why it's a standalone movie. We're like, hey, here you go, buddy.
Well, that's the only thing that I could think. Michael Waldron's being tasked to write the script of the film. They did announce that. Deadline announced that in January of 2021.
Oh, Loki executive producer. Okay, sure.
Yeah, I mean,
a lot of producers doing things that aren't producing makes me kind of nervous.
Yeah, and kind of they're moving down the food chain. Usually you move up to the producer role in the food chain, don't you?
Yeah, but directors get more critical acclaim, so
I guess, yeah.
If they're good.
And that brings us to another to-be-announced movie that they're looking to do. So this kind of all plays into that whole theme of Kathleen Kennedy, where Star Wars is moving away from movies. They've got a bunch of movies they want to do. They just don't know, or they're not releasing information. Now, we already know that Taika Waititi was confirmed to be making his own movie here. He was already out during Celebration. He was out scouting locations and filming. It's slated for a late 2023 release. I don't know if I want Taika Waititi doing a Star Wars film. Now, he did get a Star Wars episode. He did get an episode of Mandalorian, which he did great with that.
Yeah.
But I'm terrified that we're going to get a Thor comedy version of a Star Wars movie, and I don't know if that's going to go over very well.
I mean, I'm more open to the idea just because I think Thor Ragnarok was good because it made Thor more interesting and it made the universe more interesting by not taking it as seriously. But also,
it helped that every other Thor movie sucked, though.
That did help. Yeah, it's hard. It's a low bar. I have not seen the new Thor movie, which he also directed, so I'm not sure if that quality's still there.
It didn't get very high ratings.
I saw that. I try not to read that stuff, but it's everywhere. So,
yeah.
I don't know. I think Taika's a pretty talented guy. I don't know. I think if they did something where it's not, like a main character that we know, if he kind of got like his own thing that's a little more quirky, maybe that would go over well. Or just fully commit. Make a Star Wars comedy on Disney Plus. We've never seen that except for like droids.
Droids.
Yeah. I don't know. I think that could be interesting. That's what I've been saying. Let Star Wars do whatever it wants. Take away the restrictions and make something weird. And if you throw everything at the wall, which it seems like they're doing anyway.
Visions is. Visions is everything weird.
True, but make a comedy.
Well, and they did with Visions. There was elements of comedy in some of the Visions episodes too, which is fine because it's its own self-contained little box there, and it doesn't break the rest of the universe. And that brings us to the last and certainly the least desired movie project, and that is the rumored Rian Johnson trilogy. At least from my perspective, I have zero respect for Rian Johnson after The Last Jedi at this point in time. I'm sure you'll disagree to a certain extent there.
Yeah, people harp on Last Jedi pretty hard. It's not as bad as people say it is. It has bad elements, but there's good things about it, everybody. All right, there's good things, and one of those is the directing. The writing is not great, but there are great shots in it. There's great direction. Maybe not with the actors, but with the action and the cinematography and things like that.
Oh, especially like that Holdo sacrifice scene where it goes completely silent.
It's pretty cool.
And they actually had to put a notification at the movie after it premiered that the sound is okay.
Oh, really?
That's funny. That's how bad the direction was with the cinematography.
Or people are just dumb. I mean, who knows?
Well, yeah, there's a lot of
I think that's
stupid out
much
there.
more likely. Yeah, because everybody, especially if you're going to a big premiere like that, people have to clap and throw their popcorn at the screen. So, I don't know. It could be all right. I don't think it's actually going to happen, though, because I think people are way too turned against Ryan Johnson for them. Like, he's like corporate, like, he's like a bad apple, I don't think they give him another chance.
Well, and I think that's a reputation it's well earned after Last Jedi.
Well, the same thing happened with the guys from Game of Thrones. One of them, right? Benioff or Weiss, one of them was supposed to get a trilogy. And then the final season of Game of Thrones came out and everybody hated them. And they were like, well, we're just going to scrap that.
Well, and then they're coming out with the offshoot, the spin-off.
House of Dragons, something like that.
But anyway, that kind of concludes what we're looking at. We have a whole bunch of rumored movies that we have no real detail.
Yeah, that's like way less information than I thought there was going to be. Like, not like plot, they do the Marvel thing where it's like She-Hulk 2023, Thing 2,
And the setup here is that they're focusing on streaming.
Yep.
Because they have to keep people paying for streaming to get their money.
Because that's
out.
guaranteed money as opposed to releasing something in theaters.
Absolutely. So streaming, it's ridiculous how many projects they have for streaming.
And I'm not going to watch any of them.
They need to come out with another network to stream all this stuff on. So you've got Andor, right? So you're going to get Diego Luna coming back as Cassian Andor. That one's already set. They've got a release date for that for August 31st. We know we're getting that. Do we need that?
Nope, we don't. Anytime you ask that, the answer is almost always going to be no. Yeah, no. I forgot this second show we're going to talk about. I might actually watch, so I might have to retract my earlier statement.
Yeah,
but
just so you can disagree with me, right?
Well, no, I have my reasons for this second show, but no, Andor does not need to be a thing. I mean, it could be. And here's the thing: we talked about this last week. It doesn't all have to be like important to the lore. It can just be an interesting story. If Andor turns out to be like a gritty war spy thing, I don't think it will be, but if it was, and like they actually raise some questions that haven't been talked about in Star Wars before, like the more interesting parts of Rogue One, that could be something worth your time. I don't think it's going to be that.
and rumor has it that they're going to be doing that. They're supposed to be depicting the origins of the rebellion, and the rebel cause, and they keep referring back to the one scene about he's been in this since he was 7 years old or whatever it was.
Since I was 6 years old.
So it was really 7. It was
time is hard to keep track of. Space time.
But it's supposed to kind of go into that, what he sacrificed and what these other people sacrificed, and how like Mon Mothma had this idealistic idea that she could change things from within the organization, and she comes to the realization that so there's a lot of
drama,
There's a lot of that drama that they're trying to establish with this. Whether or not they pull it off or not, I don't know. We'll have to find out.
I just hope they commit. I hope they don't shy away. Like that, what you just pitched me sounds great. That sounds like that could be really interesting and deep, and really great character drama. I don't have faith in them to do that.
It's not disputes over trade lanes.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
So then the next one that you'll argue with me on is Ahsoka. And I'm actually excited about Ahsoka.
We got like the whole Rebels cast coming back.
We do. And what I like about Ahsoka is the character's finally interesting to me.
Yeah.
She's matured. She's not this annoying little
kid
anymore. Yeah, I'll use that word. But she's mature. She's a wizened Jedi at this point. Not a Jedi. I don't know what the hell she is. She's a gray Jedi.
They let her keep the lightsabers.
Yeah,
so.
But they're white now. So
yeah, it's pretty cool, huh?
But I think the time period that we're seeing here needs to be explored, and I think it's a great opportunity.
And this is after Return of the Jedi?
This is set in the same time period as Mandalorian, which is 10 years, 15 years after, or 5 years after Return of the Jedi.
Okay. Yeah, because I like Ahsoka, obviously, and I also keep forgetting the show's going to happen. But also, they've announced all these Rebels characters are coming back, and Ahsoka's appearance in Mandalorian, she's looking for Ezra. She wants to know where Thrawn is, and that's the stuff that interests me, because Thrawn's cool.
Yeah.
And if we get an adult Ezra who's again not super annoying, because
he was as annoying as she was at that age.
Except he was the whole show. I should have mentioned that when I talked about Rebels. Ezra, the main character, is the worst part of the show, and he never stops being the worst part of the show. He's insufferable. He gets 3 good moments, but I'm really looking forward to that, and I'm curious how that's going to translate to live action, because everybody always harps on the translation from animation to live action. And the real answer is because it's not meant to be that. It's not supposed to happen. But like imagine Zeb, who's the big furry dude, like in live action, he's gonna look like a monster. So I don't know what any of that's gonna look like. But yeah, I will probably watch that show. And that's it. That and Mandalorian.
All right, so we got you hooked on that. And then we've got Mandalorian Season 3 coming in with the big mistake, I think, is they're bringing Baby Yoda back in, which...
They had to.
You didn't have to. You didn't. You absolutely didn't. Everyone accepted the fact that Baby Yoda went off to train with Luke.
And he's back.
Right. And they killed that in Mandalorian Season 2.5, otherwise known as the Book of Everyone But Boba.
But like right away, which is we talked about this last week.
Stupid. So stupid that they did that.
They should have done. I'm not saying a whole season without Baby Yoda because I'm not a big Baby Yoda guy. I can't stand the kid. But
you don't like any young people in the
because it's so. At least Baby Yoda was just so, I don't know, cheap and like just a way to sell stuff, which they did.
But they didn't, though. That was the funny part. They released the series, and it took them 12 months to get a piece of merchandise out. Everybody else was selling Baby Yoda stuff.
That is true. I think if we would have gotten like half a season without him, and then he shows back up or something, just to give the Mandalorian some more character time alone,
See, and I think they had set it up perfectly. All he had to do was take the damn lightsaber. Who doesn't want a shiny lightsaber?
I thought he was going to take both.
Yeah.
Have cool armor and a lightsaber? Well, no, I thought he was going to... for those of you that don't know, Luke presents Grogu with a lightsaber or a set of a tiny Mandalorian t-shirt. and his choice is essentially you can either stay with me and be a Jedi or go live with Mandalorian.
I survived the Empire and all I got was a stupid t-shirt.
It's really funny, guys. Look it up. It's a small... He holds it up like this.
T-shirt.
Yeah. Anyway... So Grogu ends up choosing Mandalorian, and I thought he was going to pick both.
I think it would have made such a better story if he picked the lightsaber and he realized he had to put that part of his life behind him, and then Mandalorian can go off and shine on his own.
Yeah.
What the hell is he going to do with this kid now? The kid was nothing but a draw to him.
Well, now we're going to go full... I think, isn't the idea he's going to go full Mandalorian? We're going to get... We're
going to get him in a full Mando suit now?
Yeah, it's going to be a mech suit. No, I imagine they're going to go to Mandalorian and kind of make all that a thing, because, they said the Mandalorian isn't the Mandalorian anymore, even though he has the Darksaber, things like that. So I imagine it's going to be...
But you don't need Baby Yoda for it.
Well, now he's a foundling, just like Jin was, and he's going to get a mech suit.
Okay.
But I'm in because it seems like we're going back to Mandalorian. Every time that's in anything, I love it.
Okay.
We'll get Bo-Katan back.
Yeah.
And,
she's coming back.
The Armorer, the Destiny character.
No, because the Armorer is one of the mean ones now. She's one of the Death Watch, so he's not Death Watch anymore.
He's going to have to fight her, and she's going to have all different swords and stuff because she's an armorer.
Is that what she's going to have?
She's going to have a weapon wheel like Grand Theft Auto.
Anyway, so the next one we have is Skeleton Crew.
There's more?
Yeah, there's like 12.
I thought Mandalorian was the last one. All right.
We got Skeleton Crew. Jude Law is set to lead John Watt's first foray into Star Wars canon. The series follows the fall of the Empire through the eyes of 4 children, which I'm sure you'll love.
What?
Yeah. The series is previously named codename Grammar Rodeo. It's described as galactic version of classic Amblin coming-of-age adventure films through the 80s, which clearly you're not watching this one.
Well, okay, so I talked about earlier how you could make Star Wars interesting by taking other stories and putting them in Star Wars. This isn't quite what I meant. This is not what I meant. Although John Watts, he did the Spider-Man movies. He's pretty good at doing that, that Homecoming movie is very much like what's the guy's name? Like Breakfast Club, all those.
Right.
All those movies. So yeah, it could be interesting, I guess. Why? But sure, Jude Law's in it, so he can be like the principal, I guess. Anyway.
So that's another one that Filoni's involved in, as is Rangers of the New Republic, which was on again, off again, on again. This was the one that was supposed to have the 2 guys that we're seeing show up in Mandalorian, and it was supposed to, they set up Gina Carano's character, and then she pissed them off because she was tweeting stuff they didn't like, so they fired her. Then they canceled this, and then at Celebration, they indicated that this was back on. Don't know what they're doing with this one here or why they're doing this one.
Just combine this and Rogue Squadron, and no one will know. You know?
This was really what Rogue Squadron should have been.
It sounds like it's like a procedural, like they're gonna like investigate, like yeah. It's like these kind of
Law and Order for Star Wars.
These shows just sound so boring. Like, is it just me? Like, these sound like really boring.
But wait, we're not done yet.
We're really not.
Then we're gonna. Don't know if we're getting Donald Glover for it or not, but we're coming out with a Lando series, which if you don't have Donald Glover or Billy D, it's not going to be a Lando series.
Well, this was announced back when like Solo came out, right?
Yeah, but they talked about it again.
This is all just to keep the shareholders happy. None of this is ever coming out.
Well, and that's the problem. It's like, it's almost like, well, let's throw all this stuff against the wall and see what sticks. And, you know, we're going to tease all this stuff and see what kind of reaction we get.
And it's because they have to, you know, they got to keep people, Star Wars fans, like, oh, here's this content's never going to, the pipeline's going to keep on flowing, everybody.
Then after Lando, we have The Acolyte. Now, The Acolyte actually sounds kind of interesting because they're taking a different route with it.
Yeah.
It's kind of described as a mystery thriller that will take audiences into a galaxy of shadowy secrets and emerging dark side powers in the final days of the High Republic era.
Vague.
Nobody cares about the High Republic.
No, because it's all books. I don't want to read. But if it was a show, I might check it out.
Right, so this is where they're going to introduce High Republic into the series.
They should have held off on the High Republic stuff until this was ready.
You would have thought, right?
Because nobody wants to read.
No. I'm struggling getting through the second book of the High Republic. I really am. I've read every novel out there.
Is it bad?
It's terrible.
Oh.
It really is.
Well, maybe they'll do better
It's
in TV.
boring. It's more boring than some of these TV shows.
These descriptions, these very vague, good will fight evil.
Like, they don't even have good villains. You can't have a Star Wars novel without good villains. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But what's interesting about this one is it's going to be a Sith apprentice who's training to become a Sith Lord.
Mm.
So you can easily tie in elements of Plagueis and Palpatine and the history of the Sith. You can get some, who was the ruler two?
Bane?
Bane. You can get some Bane tied into this stuff.
Sure.
So there's a ton of lore that you can tie into this, which I like. Then the next one that you're going to hate, a droid story. An animated feature, a droid story will combine original Star Wars animation with new visual effects from ILM.
What does that mean?
I don't really know. It sounds like they're remaking the old animated stuff. But the film will premiere on Disney Plus and introduce a new hero guided by the iconic duo of R2-D2 and C-3PO, with Anthony Daniels confirmed to reprise.
Oh, he's got nothing going on.
I know.
He's working at Taco Bell. Sorry, Anthony, if you're watching this, but come on. I've heard you're very unlikable, so it's all right. That sounds terrible.
Well,
that sounds like a ride. Like, that sounds like a Star Tours edition.
It does. So that's another golden oldie.
More. There's more.
We got 3 more to go through here, believe it or not. So we have Tales of the Jedi.
Oh, this one's good. This is more Clone Wars.
Maybe. Tales of the Jedi will land on Disney Plus at some point in the fall of 2022. IGN describes it as a new anthology series that will tell stories of Ahsoka and Count Dooku. It's supposed to be a bunch of one-offs.
Yeah, there were some screenshots of this that leaked, and it looks like it's the Clone Wars animation style. So
yeah, which I'm not a big fan of.
Yeah.
And then we have Star Wars Visions Season 2. Did you watch any of Season 1?
I watched like 3 episodes, but I am happy it got a Season 2 because it's something different, and I'm glad that they're giving it more time.
They did a really nice job. There was, I think, 8 or 9 different stories that came out of it. They were all standalone stories. And of those, 5 were really good.
Yeah, I watched like the first 2 or 3.
Yeah, 5 were really good. 2 were okay, and the rest just throw away.
That's pretty good.
And that's a good, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
And I think it was based on that idea of, here's 9 stories, and 7 of them were good. Oh, well, let's have 15 new series and see if we can get a couple good ones out of it.
Let's dedicate 7 episodes and 15 shows. That's not how that works. Just spend billions of dollars.
And the last one we have to talk about is
oh my God.
Young Jedi Adventures. First full-length animated Star Wars series created specifically for preschoolers. Because there was a market there that we weren't serving, right?
Yeah, somebody in like the team was like, you know what demo we're missing out on? Preschoolers.
The series will follow younglings as they follow the path of the Jedi in the High Republic era and learn about compassion, self-discipline, and the power of friendship.
Hey man, if it teaches kids something, sure, you know. Good thing it's not the other Republic younglings, because then the kids would ask, what happened to all the younglings?
So it's worth noting that in the first novel of the High Republic that I've read, they slaughtered probably 50 or 60 Jedi in the first novel. I'm not sure that's preschooler material, to be honest with you.
Make it like Sesame Street. You know, just don't talk about that stuff.
Yeah, that's what we're looking at.
I guarantee you, a third of these shows never come out.
They won't. Well, I mean, some of them are already confirmed. You know, the first 4 are confirmed. So you've got Andor, Ahsoka, Mando season 3, and Skeleton Crew are confirmed.
And Bad Batch season 2, which isn't in here.
It's not. Bad Batch season 2, Acolyte's confirmed. Visions season 2 is confirmed. So there's only like 4 of these that are speculative.
Yeah. Okay. The pipeline, the content will never stop.
So we talked in our last episode about whether or not this is overkill. Is this overkill?
I mean, it looks really bad seeing it all on paper like this. So yeah, it is. And we talked about Star Wars fatigue. You know, people are already feeling that after 3 sequel movies and all these shows already on Disney Plus. And I think depending on the release schedule of this, it's only going to get worse. I think the only way to, not the only way, but a big way to save this would be something like an MCU Thanos buildup where everything is tying into this larger thing. I think these scattershot shows and movies are just not going to grab people like they think it is.
Yeah, and I think the philosophy is that Star Wars is in a universe, and it's a big universe, and it's more than just a Skywalker story. So let's tell everybody's story in the universe. And they're really kind of close to that at this point.
Yeah, but I at the end of the day, I think they're always going to fall back on, you know, the Vaders and
you have to, because that's the moneymakers.
Yeah, it's tough.
You know, at the end of the day, they need to make profit, right? The one thing, and we're already pushing up against the time, but I don't care. We're not gonna go to another episode. We're gonna finish it up here.
Yeah.
So Star Wars in movie and television is one thing. Now you can live Star Wars, right? So you can go to Disneyland, Disney World. You can go to Galaxy's Edge. You can stay at the new Star Cluster.
I have no idea what it's called.
I don't forget what it's called. The Halcyon, the new hotel you can stay at. When I heard about all this stuff, I was so excited because I've loved Star Wars my entire life, and I thought it would be great to be able to live in that environment, or at least visit it.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that? Do you think it needs to come off the silver screen? Do you think it helps to add to it? What are your thoughts on that?
Just theme parks in general for me, I have a really hard time getting immersed. You know, I'm a jaded, cynical old man now.
We dragged you to Disney enough to make you hate it?
Well, it's just like, for me, there was definitely a time in my life where this would have been awesome. It would have been like, hey, I'm going to get fully into the same thing with the Marvel Avengers Campus, where it's like you see the dummy of Spider-Man fly across and hit the brick wall because the thing broke.
You saw that.
Yeah, it's a very funny video. Those things, they do nothing for me, and they're all way too expensive. And it's not that interesting to me, unfortunately. But if you can get in there and you can really feel it, and if you enjoy it and it can do something for you that movies can't, where you're in that world, more power to you. Harry Potter World was pretty cool, and I'm not even that big of a Harry Potter fan, but that was very neat. So, you know, something like that I think could be interesting. It's not my cup of tea.
And I tend to agree with you. You know, I've only been to Galaxy's Edge once at this point, and I enjoyed it. I had a good time. I could have spent the entire day just soaking it up. The promise of the interaction that they offered you when they first launched it's not there. That's where the hotel comes in. So now you got to spend $6,000 for a 2-night stay to get that. To me, it's a lame attempt to capture the nostalgia that you get from the movies and TV. And what bothers me more than anything is it's not my Star Wars. You know, that Galaxy's Edge is set in the sequel trilogy era, and I just It's not my Star Wars.
Which is interesting, right? Because they know that. I feel like they have to know that most people don't like the sequel trilogy, or at least the people that are going to spend $6,000 for a 2-night stay. So why would you not? I think if they made an original trilogy themed area, maybe they're saving that for other parks. You get a prequel one, you get an original trilogy one. I don't know, but I think it's a strange. I don't know. Maybe they decided to double down, right? If we make a hotel, maybe it will convince people to like these movies more.
It's really hard for me to go to a Star Wars land and know I'm not going to see Darth Vader.
Yeah.
It's just, he's Star Wars, and he's not there.
That is very strange.
And it just seems very cheap, and it's a money grab to me. So
yeah, I mean, that's the theme of the sequel trilogy.
What's the one drink cost at the hotel?
Oh, the Kai Burr crystal, the $5,000 drink.
Yeah, which is just, it's insulting. The fact that you're asking me to spend $6,000 to stay in a room smaller than our studio here, for 2 nights, it's insulting. Like, I have the money. I could go there today and book that and stay there and not blink an eye at it. I refuse to spend that kind of money because of how insulting they are.
Yeah, and they're counting on the Star Wars fan that has the money like yourself, but that doesn't have the free will, the free will in their brain to say, wait a minute, they're just bleeding me dry. They don't care about me. Yeah. They just, yeah.
We're going there again in August, and I'm going to spend a lot of money there. I'm going to come back with a boatload of merchandise that I don't need.
Do you have a good time though? Do you enjoy it?
And that's the idea. I'm going to, I don't know, in August I might not enjoy it so much. In
Florida.
But yeah, I mean,
and that's really all that matters.
It's disappointing that it's that money grab. That's all.
It's okay to fuel these corporate monopolies as long as you're having a good time. As long as you don't think about it.
Thank you so much for helping me justify it.
As long as you have that dopamine hit when you buy a new figure or something, it's okay. Just spend money and don't think about it.
Thank you. I feel so much better now. That'll change my life now. Thank you.
Use your Twitch Prime sub to subscribe to this if you have it.
Oh, so I think that's all we have. I think we beat this topic to death.
Yeah.
Today with our second episode. Before we do go, though, I would want to just once again invite you to subscribe to the podcast. You can get audio versions of this podcast listed as Insights into Entertainment. Video and audio of all the network's podcasts can be found listed as Insights into Things. You can find us on Pandora, Castro, Stitcher, Podbean, Buzzsprout, any place you get a podcast. Write in, give us your feedback. Tell us what you'd like us to talk about. Tell us, how if we're doing a good job or not. Do you want us to? Do you want to bash me for hating Ahsoka? Write in and tell me about it. You can email us at comments@insightsintothings.com. We do stream on Twitch 5 days a week at twitch.tv/insightsintothings. If you are an Amazon Prime subscriber, you get a free monthly Twitch subscription, and we'd appreciate you throwing that our way. You can also find high-res versions of all of our videos on YouTube at youtube.com/insightsintothings, or you can find links to all those and more on our official website at www.insightsintothings.com. You had something else?
Yes, I would like to issue a challenge to everybody out there. What's the best metric? Twitch follows or subs for us? If we get 10 Twitch subs by the time Andor comes out, I will watch it and we'll do a review on this program.
Wow.
That's a challenge for all you people out there.
That is bold.
I will abandon my principles for 10 Twitch subs. That's not even that much money. You can do it, everybody.
Good to know you've got a price.
But yes, if August 31st is when the first episode comes out, if we have 10 Twitch subs by then, we will be doing a full review of Andor.
All right. You heard it here first, folks. That's all we have for today. Another one in the books.
Bye-bye.
Bye. For over 7 years, the Second Sith Empire has been the premier community guild in the online game Star Wars: The Old Republic. with hundreds of friendly and helpful active members, a weekly schedule of nightly events, annual guild meet and greets, and an active community both on the web and on Discord. The Second Sith Empire is more than your typical gaming group. We're family. Join us on the Starforge server for nightly events such as operations, flashpoints, world boss hunts, Star Wars trivia, guild lottery, and much more. Visit us on the web today at www.thesecondsithempire.com.
Insightful podcasts by informative hosts. Insights into Things, a podcast network. Welcome to Insights into Tomorrow, where we take a deeper look into how the issues of today will impact the world of tomorrow. From politics and world news to media and technology, we discuss how today's headlines are becoming tomorrow's reality.
Welcome to Insight into Tomorrow. This is episode 17, Women's Rights Are Human Rights. I'm your host, Joseph Whalen, and my special guest host this week from our Insights into Entertainment podcast, Michelle Whalen. How you doing today, Michelle?
Full of many, many emotions.
I can imagine. We had actually planned on doing this podcast for a little while now. We've been working on putting it together and stuff,
Right.
Understanding that there was going to be an impending decision. And today was the scheduled day that we were going to do this.
Right, not knowing.
Not knowing that yesterday was going to be the day that the other shoe dropped.
Right.
So we're going to continue to go through the material that we did plan, and we reserved the last segment to have an open discussion on the groundbreaking, rule-shattering, country-damaging decision, I think, that came yesterday. So there's been a disturbing trend in recent years in the United States. There's been an assault on women's, an assault has been waged on basic human rights. Victims of this assault have been chosen by color of their skin and their gender and various other things. All are victims that have been targeted for generations and have fought for their equal human rights. In this episode of Insights into Tomorrow, we're going to take a deeper look at the assault specifically on women's rights. We'll take a look at the history of women's rights through the years. We'll examine the current state of women's rights, and we'll explore the threats against those rights. Before we leave, we'll take a special look at the current issue of abortion and the not-so-impending Supreme Court decision that threatens to overturn, which it did overturn, Roe versus Wade. But before we do that, I'd like to take a moment to invite our listening and viewing audiences to subscribe to the podcast. You can find audio versions of this podcast listed as Insights into Tomorrow. You can find video and audio of all the network's podcasts listed as Insights into Things, and you can pick those up anywhere you can get a podcast these days. We're pretty much everywhere. I would also invite you to write in, give us your comments, give us your feedback, tell us how we're doing. Email us at comments@insightsintothings.com, where you can find links to all of our social media on our official website at www.insightsintothings.com. Are we ready?
As ready as we'll ever be.
Let's get into it.
So, all women are entitled to human rights. These include the right to live free from violence and discrimination, to enjoy the highest attainable standard of physical and mental health, to be educated, and to own property, to vote, and to earn an equal wage. Across the globe, many women and girls still face discrimination on the basis of sex and gender. Gender inequality underpins many problems which disappropriately affect women and girls, such as domestic and sexual violence, lower pay, lack of access to education, and inadequate health care. For many years, women's rights movements have fought hard to address these inequalities, campaigning to change laws or taking to the streets to demand their rights are respected. And new movements have flourished in the digital age, such as the Me Too campaign, which highlights the prevalence of gender-based violence and sexual harassment.
So there has been a fairly long history of women's fight for their rights, in the United States at least, because when the country was formed, there was no explicit provisions in the Constitution for women's rights to anything.
Mm-hmm.
The Constitution protected, quote, consent of the government, consent of the governed, which at the time meant white landholding men
Mm-hmm.
only.
Right.
The Bill of Rights did not protect everyone either. Women were considered second-class citizens. They were essentially property of their husbands.
So women started to organize as early as the Seneca Falls Convention in July of 1848. It planted the seeds for the women's suffrage movement. It pushed for equal rights for all people of all races and sexes. The end result was the signing of the Declaration of Sentiments by 100 men and women, a document based on the Declaration of Independence.
So we move into the women's suffrage movement. This is really probably the foundation for the first fight for women's rights. Wyoming passed the first law granting women the right to vote in 1869 and was the first state to grant women the right to vote in all elections in 1890. But it took until 1920 for the 19th Amendment to the Constitution to allow women the right to vote across the country.
So now let's talk a little bit about abortion and contraception. So there were widespread anti-contraception laws on the books as late as 1819 before they were challenged, starting with Margaret Sanger in New York. Abortion laws criminalized the act of ending a pregnancy apart from saving a woman's life were in place and well into the 60s before any challenges were raised. These obviously culminated into the 1973 Roe v. Wade Supreme Court ruling that being drawn into question, unfortunately, as of yesterday.
Yeah. So then we move on to women's equal employment and equal pay. The first minimum wage laws applied to women didn't come into effect until 1912. This was later superseded by the 1938 Fair Labor Standards Act, imposing a federal minimum age regardless of gender. It wasn't until 1963 with the Equal Pay Act that any attention was given to equitable wages, wages too probably, but wages for the same work performed by men. It took until 1974 for Congress to include gender protection in fair housing and education as part of the Civil Rights Act. Now, it's worth noting that even though these laws were on the books, they're on the books today. They're not observed. There's still discrimination today, despite the fact that we have these laws on the books.
Right, exactly. And finally, leadership in government. So the first woman to serve in Congress was Jeanette Pickering Rankin, who didn't take her seat until 1917. But it would take nearly 100 years for a woman to take on the leadership role of Speaker of the House when Nancy Pelosi assumed that role for the first time in 2007. And we didn't see our first Supreme Court justice until 1981 with Sandra Day O'Connor. And Madeleine Albright was our first Secretary of State in 1997. And obviously, our first female Vice President, Kamala Harris, in 2020.
So, the disturbing trend that I see in this history here is there's spurts of progress. There's long periods where there's no progress. Then you get a few exceptional people that just get mad as hell and they're not going to take it anymore, and they do something about it.
Yep.
And the establishment throws a couple of crumbs out there and gives a little bit of rights to people. And then there's a long period of time until it happens again.
Mm-hmm.
How do you think this compares to other fights, civil rights, for instance? How do you think this compares to civil rights for African Americans and minorities?
It's almost the same, really, when you think about it. Unless you are a rich white male, you're fighting every day, and maybe once in a while something comes along that you get something, and then unfortunately something else in the news is going to pop up where everybody's mindset is on something else, and that fight still hasn't been won.
Yeah.
And until something happens with that fight again, everybody kind of forgets about it, because again, our attention span, is, we have short attention span theater, of our minds. Look at, not to get on a totally different tangent, but all of the school shootings, it's been how many weeks and none of that is in the news. There, you have the gun reforms that they're trying to pass. But again, now that you have everything going on with Roe v. Wade, that's the main focus. But yet there's other things that still need to be focused. Black Lives Matter still needs to be a focus, because you had everything that went on with George Floyd and all the other African Americans who, with the police issues and things like that, and none of that was solved, but because something else came along, oh, well, now our attention, but no, you have to go back and do all the other things.
It's funny you mention that. What do you think is the cause of that? Is that a media issue? Is that a society issue? Is it a politics issue where politicians don't want to deal with the issue, so they distract with something else? Or is it media just trying to get ratings that's dictating what our issues are today?
I don't know. I think it's a little bit of. I think everybody's a little bit to blame with all of that, because obviously media is one aspect, and when you kind of think back of, okay, well, why did it take so long? So Wyoming, it was the 1800s when, Wyoming, but it wasn't until the 1900s that it was actually, and you have to think back then, how long did it take for news to travel? How long, same thing with Juneteenth. It was signed into law that blacks were no longer slaves, but how many years did it take for the news to actually travel? Right. There was no quick way to do it, where now we have that instant gratification. We can, as soon as news broke yesterday of the Supreme Court's decision, everybody in the world knew about it. So I think a lot of it is because we're so hungry for information right now, what's the next thing? What's the next thing? What do I need to do? And also, we're all so tired. We're all so tired of having to stand up for everybody. And there's just so much injustice. It's like, well, where do I put my energy?
Where's my next fight? Yeah.
And it's like, I have no more spoons to give. My jar is empty because I've given, so much, because there's so much that's needed, from all of us. I think that's where it comes to, because there's obviously thousands and thousands of organizations and different things that are in need, but it's, how much can the average person give before you have nothing left to give?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's definitely been a problem. Let's take a little break. We'll come back and we're going to talk a little bit more detail about where we are right now with these specific women's rights. We'll be right back.
For over 7 years, the Second Sith Empire has been the premier community guild in the online game Star Wars: The Old Republic. With hundreds of friendly and helpful active members, a weekly schedule of nightly events, annual guild meet and greets, and an active community both on the web and on Discord. The Second Sith Empire is more than your typical gaming group. We're family. Join us on the Starforge server for nightly events such as operations, flashpoints, world boss hunts, Star Wars trivia, guild lottery, and much more. Visit us on the web today at www.thesecondsithempire.com.
So let's talk about the current state of women's rights. And we'll talk first about women's suffrage. At the moment, it's safe to say that fight has been won, I guess, kind of, sort of, in the general statement, yes.
If nothing else, we can say that women are equally discriminated against with everyone else when it comes to your right to vote these days.
Yes.
Okay, there's no special discrimination.
Right.
Against women on this one.
Okay, we can go with that. Abortion and contraception. Well, this had been won, but it looks like it might be a split decision with the much anticipated ruling from the majority right-wing Supreme Court that was held yesterday. And we'll have more on this later on in the show.
So we take a look at employment and pay. So legally on paper, this was a win back in 1963 with the Equal Pay Act. Do you feel like this was a win?
No.
And I think most women would be of the same opinion. In practice, there's a long fight ahead of this one. Progress continues to be made, but not nearly enough to level the playing field between men and women, equal pay, equal work. It's a mess. And the fact that people are still getting away with it is frankly disturbing, that you can get away with it.
Yep.
Leadership in government. There was a surprising amount of progress early on this, but it's been painfully slow in coming into the modern time. Since, the 80s, 2000, we've seen some progress here. Many parts of the country are progressive enough to make the progress that's needed. There are other parts, and less progressive, less evolved parts of the country, where politics is still an old boys network. But from a national standpoint, we're seeing, we have a female vice president now, which is huge. How do you think, let's talk women's suffrage, your ability to vote. Do you feel you have the ability to go out there and vote when you want, for who you want, how you want?
Absolutely. And that's something I've never felt I wasn't able to do. I've never felt that I wasn't allowed. Even in high school, senior year was when I turned 18, and I had a history teacher who was very passionate about the women's movement and made sure she had her little pamphlets in her desk drawer, and who's turning 18 this month, fill out your form so you can vote. And she said it doesn't matter if it's a presidential election, if it's governor election, even your little local election, you will vote every time because there are women that died doing this. It is your heritage. It is your responsibility to pass this on and make sure you vote.
How do you think how can I say this without getting hate mail? How do you think the outcome of the 2020 election
or the 2016 election? We can even go.
You could, but specifically the 2020 election, in which there was an artificial stigma built up about the legitimacy of the election and voting and voter fraud. And it drew the entire country into that. And now we're seeing certain states that support a certain party are now imposing laws that, if not discriminating against people from voting,
will make it harder,
making it much more difficult.
Absolutely. And that's...
Do you feel threatened by that?
Fortunately, I don't, because at this point we are in a very blue state, and I've never felt threatened going to our polling places. We don't have far to travel. We usually never have more than 5 minutes to wait, if we even have a wait whenever we've gone. And I know that's not the case for states right next to ours, where people will wait in line hours to cast their vote, or have to travel, an hour to get to their polling place. And I would probably feel intimidated if I had to go through all those measures, and almost jump through hoops to fulfill my civic duty.
Right.
And nobody should have to feel that way to do that.
Absolutely. Abortion and contraception. So for now, we're going to put abortion aside because we already have a discussion on the last segment. Contraception.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel that you can acquire the contraception that you want, and that the health care that you need as far as women's health is readily available to you? Do you think that's a threat? Do you think progress needs to be made on that front?
So, again, being a white female, a middle-class white female in a blue state, I don't feel discriminated at all against any healthcare. I know that's not the case for others of my gender in other parts of our country. That now that is something that there are rumors about being taken away. Now you see all over social media people saying, if you're on some sort of IUD, if you're on any sort of implant, get it replaced now. Anything that, has a couple of years, because we don't know what's coming down the pike. The fact that some male can make a decision what I do with my body absolutely blows my mind. And that, whether or not I'm a married woman or a single woman should have nothing to do with it either. And that if I want to have a child, it should be by choice.
Right.
I should not be forced. I am still of age where I could have a child. I am not at a point where I would want to begin that process all over again. And I need to have that body autonomy. That's my right to decide that, and nobody else should decide it. I don't make a decision for anybody if they want to be on Viagra or not, or if they want to get, reconstructive surgery or some. I don't make that decision for anybody else. So nobody should be making a decision
Sure.
for what I do to myself.
And I agree 110%. As long as you don't expect the government to pay for it, then
Right.
it's your say what you do.
Mm-hmm.
I'm totally down with that.
Mm-hmm.
Employment and pay. Where do we stand with this? Do you think there's sufficient progress? Do you think you're compensated fairly for what you do? And do you think that there is a threat to that looming?
I don't know. It's one of those things because, of course, at most places of employment, one of the rules is you don't talk about how much you make. So, you don't find out how much somebody else is making. So that's a really hard, I know, or I shouldn't say I assume within the company that I work in, there are people that work in the North Jersey facility that make much more money than the people in the South Jersey facility.
And that's unusual because of geographics.
Right, absolutely. But again, it shouldn't matter where I'm physically located because I'm doing just as much work as
well, there's certain factors
else.
like cost of living and stuff like that.
Absolutely.
That you have to factor in
totally. I totally.
But compensation-wise, on a 1-to-1 ratio, are you being fairly compensated?
I really don't know because it's one of the things that probably bad on me is I kind of stopped paying attention because there's always these websites you can go to and say, how much does a person that does this job make? And the thing is, what I do for a living is kind of specific to my job, so it's kind of hard to say if I went someplace else where I could kind of try and figure it out. And I think I know I'm probably underpaid. Just one, because I'm,
is it because you're a woman or because you're a one-of-a-kind person doing what you do?
I don't know. It might be a combination of both. We recently at my company had somebody who left the company who was a woman. I never asked her or found out how much she made. I knew she probably made more than I did, even though I've been with the company much longer than she had been. And we recently hired somebody who I knew was a grade level or a position higher than her. And I have a feeling probably started out making more than she did.
Okay.
So that's another,
So clearly we're not where we need to be.
No.
Leadership in government. So my question to you here is, clearly we're seeing progress certainly on the federal level. Mm-hmm. A lot of states are making progress with women in leadership positions. You personally, do you think the door's open for you if you wanted to get into, say, local politics? Do you think you'd have any obstacles with that? Do you think you'd be discriminated against because of your gender?
I don't know. I think in a lot of cases it's still a boys' club when you come to, your local. But I'm sure there are some areas of the country where it's not like that. I've never been interested in wanting to run for a government position, so it was never something that I thought about, but I could see where I wouldn't, again, where we live, where we are. I'm sure if it was something where I started volunteering or doing things, I could, eventually see something
You know, what's interesting is of the 4 fundamental rights that we talked about, 3 of these you attributed to some level of political influence on how it impacts you.
Mm-hmm.
That's disturbing. That women's rights are a matter of politics.
And they shouldn't be.
No, they shouldn't. And I think that is a highlight of where we are today. And it astounds me, and we're not going to pull any punches here. You're obviously a Democratic supporter.
I am. How did you know?
What astounds me is your experience, I would say, is pretty typical for most women, Democratic women or Republican women. But there are so many staunch Republican women that support a party that has, for over a century, had policies that were contrary to women's interests.
Mm-hmm.
And what is it about people like that who would support someone who wants to hold you down? Like, is it I almost attribute it to like a beaten wife syndrome type thing.
Yeah.
Where they just accept their place as a lesser citizen in society.
And you have to kind of think that, you know, there are still women that are you know, young girls, women that are raised today to your only job in life is to raise the family and support your husband. And that's it. And I'm not knocking anyone that's what they want to do in their life. If that's
what you aspire to do, knock your socks off.
Right.
But don't hold other people back.
Exactly.
In the process.
But don't tell me that I can't do more.
Absolutely.
Or tell my daughter that she can't be more.
Yeah, that's my hang up about this whole thing. As much as I hate seeing how you are treated, it irks me to think that she's going to face some of these same prejudices, and it really pisses me off.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I want to do everything I can to make sure that she's got every opportunity.
And I'm so proud of what she stands for and what she believes in. And yes, a lot of it has to do with us, but there's a lot that, you know, is her own, you know, and I'm so glad that we raised her and are still raising her to be so open-minded to things. And she, in so many cases, is more open-minded than we will ever be. And that gives me hope that, you know, she's also surrounded, you know, she surrounds herself with people that feel that way too, and that generation will hopefully make a difference and bring about so much that more than we could ever hope for.
I'm also very fortunate that she's patient enough to help
educate,
carry me along in that journey.
Yes,
I've learned a lot. Mm-hmm. I've learned a lot from her that I never thought I would learn. Mm-hmm. Let's take another break, and when we come back, we're going to take a look at what some of the obstacles and threats are to these rights. We'll be right back.
Insights into Teens, a podcast series exploring the issues and challenges of today's youth. Talking to real teens about real teen problems. Explore issues from braces to puberty, social anxiety to financial responsibility. Each week, we talk about the topics concerning today's youth. We look at how the issues affect teens, how to cope with these issues, and how parents, friends, and loved ones can help teens handle these challenges. Check out our video episodes on youtube.com/insightsintothings. Catch our audio versions on podcast.insightsintoteens.com or on the web at insightsintothings.com.
So threats and obstacles to women's rights in America. And, we'll attack these rights as we've been doing in order. So the first one we're going to talk about is women's suffrage. So in the wake of the toxic 2020 elections, there's been a wholesale attack on voting rights. These attacks aren't targeted specifically at women and are designed to make it harder for people in general to vote. Not too much in general, but there's specific segments of the population that are targeted at. So some of the obstacles. 17 states have enacted 28 new laws that restrict access to voting by targeting citizens with disabilities. The fact that they're not including accessibility, common accessibility options to get into voting places that make it difficult for people with disabilities to vote. They're attacking absentee voting. After the 2020 election, when when absentee voting was done, because we were in the middle of a pandemic, a pandemic that the sitting president ignored for the first 4 months and downplayed it and pretended it didn't exist and created the crisis in the first place. They're attacking provisional ballots. They're requiring voter ID, which there's nothing. Take a drink here. I'm joking to death. This is how much I hate these rules. There's nothing in the Constitution that says voter ID is required to cast your vote. Nowhere. So I don't know where they're coming up with that one. They're targeting voter registration. They're making it harder to register. They're requiring different requirements to now register. They're instituting registration purging. So normally with registration purging, if you don't vote in so many elections, they purge you from the voter registration roll. Well, that number of elections is usually like 4, 5, something like that, presidential elections. Now they're saying if you don't vote in the last one, you're not registered anymore.
Oh, see,
You need to register again to vote. They're restricting student voting, making it difficult for students, because before they would make it accessible to students to vote during student hours and stuff like that at colleges. They're restricting that. And they're limiting polling places to make it harder to vote. So people who are, again, disabled, infirmed, aged, people that don't drive, they're making them travel hours to get to a voting place to cast a vote, knowing that they won't vote because they're the people that they don't want voting because they're going to vote for the opposition.
Right.
So that's some of what we're looking at here. Not specifically against women, but affecting everybody.
Right. And you figure it's the lower income, more likely the people of color.
Yep.
That's the areas that they're really targeting.
Absolutely. So what's your next one?
Abortion. Somehow, after nearly 50 years, this is still a matter of debate. Instead of being an ideological discussion, anything to do with abortions has turned into a political discussion, which generally means that all logic is out the window with it. There is a real threat to women's reproductive rights with the recent leaked draft of the opinion by the Supreme Court that now wasn't just a leak, because now it has come to fruition that they have now overturned Roe v. Wade.
More on that later.
Later on.
Deep cleansing breaths.
Deep cleansing breaths. Okay. Let's go back to employment and pay. So on average, women earn 82 cents for every dollar that a man earns. And in comparing salaries over 350 jobs, women actually earn less in nearly all jobs. Women earn less than their same race and ethnicity, their counterparts at entry-level positions, of education attained as well. So the pandemic is estimated to have set the women's labor force back more than 30 years.
So there's that progress that we're losing.
That astonishes me that during the pandemic that even, happened. Finally, leadership in government. Again, we now finally have a woman vice president. How many years did that take? And then you even look back, how far was when the first vice president, female vice president, was in the 80s, late 80s, and then
Geraldine Ferraro.
Geraldine Ferraro.
Nomination,
never elected. And then you even had Sarah Palin, the second, never elected.
Right.
So it took 3 women, but how many years, obviously, to get to that position? Another interesting thing, for the first time in our history as a government, there will be 2 female signatures posted on currency in our country, because we will have the treasurer has Secretary of the Treasurer, and what's the other signature that's on the bill? I can't think of what it is, but that was something that came out in the news because of a newly appointed position. Top 2 women in money.
Right. See, and I'll tell you,
so
while that's nice that we've gotten to that point, what annoys me is every time the press takes this is the first time a woman did this, and this is the first time a woman...
Right.
It annoys me that we're saying that.
Right. It's annoying that we have to say anything like that. And when you look at... Obviously, there are other countries in the world that will never have women in government. But then there are other countries that have had women in leadership and had women in politics so much longer, and they kind of look at us and go, how backwards are you?
And these women were incredibly strong, competent women who overshadowed their previous male counterparts by a long shot,
right?
In most cases.
So it just baffles me, with as progressive as we say we are as a country, we're so backwards than so much more.
Well, and the thing that annoys me when we say it's the first woman to do this, that fact doesn't annoy me. But what annoys me is that attention that we draw to it being the first woman to do that is the same attention that the detractors use. Mm-hmm. Oh, well, you have a first woman in the Treasury, and look at what the economy's like, as if it's their fault,
right?
And they use that fact that they're a woman as justification for how things are and the state of, and it annoys me that they do that.
Right, and the other thing too is how many women had to do so many other things to get that person, to lift that woman up.
Absolutely.
To do that. That's the thing. Standing
on the shoulders of giants.
Absolutely.
And women like Kamala Harris was extremely complimentary and appreciative of all the women that came before her that gave her the opportunity that she has today.
Yeah, absolutely.
So a lot of obstacles out there that we need to
we've come far, but we haven't come far enough.
Right. And it's almost like the old boys network, their attitude's almost like, all right, well, we threw you a bone, now shut up and go away for a while, okay? You're fine. Like, they're terrified of having an equal playing field, and they think trickling little bits out here and there will keep the masses occupied and quiet them down when they get a little riled up, which is unfortunate. That's why you know, the one thing that I think might come out of this Supreme Court ruling is that a lot of rich white guys might not have a career in politics moving forward anymore.
Let's hope and pray.
We'll talk about
prayers
that.
And thoughts.
We're going to take our last break, and we'll talk about that when we come back.
Insights into Entertainment, a podcast series taking a deeper look into entertainment and media. Our husband and wife team of pop culture fanatics are exploring all things from music and movies to television and fandom. We'll look at the interesting and obscure entertainment news of the week. We'll talk about theme park and pop culture news. We'll give you the latest and greatest on pop culture conventions. We'll give you a deep dive into Disney, Star Wars, and much more. Check out our video episodes at youtube.com/insightsintothings. Our audio episodes at podcast.insightsintoentertainment.com, or check us out on the web at insightsintothings.com.
So, women's rights are human rights.
Damn Skippy.
And as of yesterday, I think we've seen a significant encroachment upon women's rights.
You think?
So, this is our open discussion on Roe versus Wade and abortion in general. You have the floor, dear.
I don't even know where to
Rip into it. How about we start with just the hypocrisy of the Supreme Court's decision? Because the day before, they had a very contradictory decision.
Absolutely. They said that you could carry a gun, that it's okay to carry around a gun now. You don't need to conceal it anymore.
Right. So New York had some very common sense gun safety laws
for over 100 years,
designed to save lives.
Right.
Which the Supreme Court decided that was a constitutional violation.
Right.
Where if you read the Constitution and the Second Amendment, nowhere in there does it say anything about carrying concealed weapons by citizens.
Right.
It speaks entirely about pertaining to a well-regulated militia.
Right.
Which for some reason everyone seems to want to ignore that. So
right.
So
because it's all up for interpretation. Yep. That's what it is.
So the Supreme Court decides that we're going to do away with common sense gun law because it's against people's constitutional rights.
Mm-hmm.
But now you can't get an abortion.
Nope.
So we're preserving life on one side with overturning Roe versus Wade, but we really don't give a damn about it because you can carry guns and shoot anybody you want.
Right. So one of the memes, our government is bold enough to force you to have a kid, but is too weak to ensure that they make it to recess alive.
Yeah.
If that is not...
That's profound.
With between the past 2 days of the Supreme Court, that... How?
Yeah, it highlights the ludicrous level of hypocrisy coming out of today's Supreme Court.
Right. The fact that church and state is supposed to be separate, but yet the church has more say over my body, and I'm not a member of a church.
Right.
My religion... I am Jewish, if you didn't know. My religion states abortion is okay. Because my life is more important than what is in my body, what is in my womb. Yeah. And until what is growing in my womb can live and take 3 breaths on its own, it doesn't have a choice over me.
Well, you could also interpret the 2 rulings from the Supreme Court of you can have an abortion as long as you don't mind getting shot in the process.
Right. Right. And unfortunately, there has been violence that has happened at clinics that aren't even performing abortions. Because that's the other thing, is that everybody goes after Planned Parenthood. Oh, they're doing all these abortions and da-da-da-da. That's not even their main purpose. That they are giving health care to women And somebody going there just for a routine checkup is risking their life from these crazy psychopaths who are trying to save the unborn child, but yet are taking their gun to go kill people.
Well, and to play devil's advocate for a minute there, you have people who are pro-abortion who are also attacking anti-abortion clinics as well. So you've got violence on both sides. You've got crimes being committed on both sides. But if nothing else, that should simply highlight the level of passion involved here, that the decision that the Supreme Court made to overturn a previous Supreme Court decision, which honestly, that's where I have my biggest problem, is the Supreme Court has basically made itself useless.
Right.
They decided that no matter what we decide, it doesn't matter because the guys 5 years from now can overturn it.
Right. And that's where now, okay, so everybody's, kind of, you have the people that are like, oh, well, it's still at the state level and da-da-da-da-da, and now you can still travel to get to states even though they were passing laws saying that you couldn't, and that there were certain laws where, if the doctor performed one, they were going to be jailed, and the woman who received it was going to be jailed, and all this other. But this isn't where it's going to stop.
Right.
That's the thing that most people aren't looking at, is now that you've taken this away, now all these other rights of, gay and lesbian couples, you're seeing that there are people out there that are, get a hold of a lawyer, make sure everything is written and that you have legal documentation. If you have children, make sure there is legal documentation. Make sure you have copies of your birth certificates and everything, that both parents are listed. If you got married in a state that is in danger of overturning your marriage decision, I have various clergy friends that are now offering free to remarry you in a state that is protecting you. And the contraception, that's another thing that now, oh, thank God for Clarence Thomas, for everything. But you know what law he's not going to overturn is Loving, because that affects him, because he's married to a lovely white woman but all the recent things he's picking in, oh, well, I can't do that one, but I can do this one.
And this is the problem that I have, is that our current Supreme Court has turned into an activist court. Mm-hmm. And their job is to rule on the constitutionality of laws and situations.
Right.
It's not to make new laws. It's not to overturn laws. The Supreme Court should never be able to overturn a Supreme Court decision.
Right.
Because the Supreme Court is the Supreme Court.
Right.
It's the law of the land.
Right.
If they can overturn their own decisions, where do you go from there?
Right, exactly. And that's the thing, is now what else is on the books that you can overturn?
Right. The only way a Supreme Court decision should be overturned is with a constitutional amendment. Mm-hmm. That's the only thing that should overturn.
Right.
So a couple of things that come out of this. One, you're going to see an assault on other freedoms that the right-wing nut jobs in the Supreme Court don't agree with. That's the number one concern. Number two, you're going to push decisions like this down to the state. Mm-hmm. So you're going to have 50 different laws in 50 different states covering all these different things.
We're basically becoming 50 different countries at this point.
Yep. The other problem that I have is now, because you're going to see the Supreme Court overturning Supreme Court precedent, the only way to defend against that is a constitutional amendment. Mm-hmm. And to think of our politics today and who's, how that razor sharp edge that we're on right now between Republican and Democrat, to think that these idiots would contemplate doing amendments to the Constitution terrifies me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, we thought we were ripping the Constitution apart with the 2020 election. These people are just itching to rewrite it in their favor. Mm-hmm. And that's what scares me more than anything else. Yes, the whole abortion thing is probably never should have gotten to the Supreme Court, because really it's not, and at least it shouldn't have gotten there in the form that it did, because abortion is not a constitutionally protected right. Your health is, your personal well-being is, and that's how it should have been presented to the Supreme Court, and then you couldn't overturn it at that point.
Right.
But things that go to the Supreme Court now don't matter.
Right.
Because after a couple of years and you get a couple of justices retire, whoever happens to be president at the time, they're going to switch it their way.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's a real threat that Joe Biden might pack the Supreme Court now because of the situation that's going on.
Mm-hmm.
So then, okay, so 5 years down the line, when we have a new president out there, what's going to happen there? Are we going to wind up with 50 Supreme Court justices because every time a new president comes in, they want to make sure that the court's tilted in their favor?
Mm-hmm.
Like it's, this decision breaks the country.
Mm-hmm. In so many ways.
Yeah. Do you feel threatened by this?
Absolutely. And fortunately, again, I'm an older woman. Ugh, as much as that hurts me. Who I know if, again, something were to happen, I have the means, I have the ability to get the help that I would need. No matter what, because again, we live in a state where it is still legal and will probably always remain legal. I worry about women, girls, trans men, even, who live in areas where they don't have it accessible and can't get the help that they need.
Yeah.
That's what makes me angry. And, you know, I want to go fight.
What do you think needs to happen to set this right? What does the government, the president, the Supreme Court, citizens, what do we have to do to fix this and have it stay fixed? Because we thought it was fixed.
Right. And that's the thing, is there are certain states where it is fixed. No matter what the law of the land is, it's, you know, it was voted in. And that's, I think, what is so frustrating, is that why does it even need to be that way? Why do people have to vote on it? You know, if I want to go and buy a pack of cigarettes, I can go and buy a pack of cigarettes. What does it matter if I want to, you know, do that? And I've never been a smoker, and, you know, I would never want to smoke, but yet you can go and that's what's just so...
Your point there being it's your body, you can do what you want to do.
Right. You know, and granted, I got into a discussion, a little bit of a debate with a friend of mine that from high school where, you know, again, my body, my choice, and she's anti-vax and, you know, but very liberal in certain respects and conservative in, you know, she's kind of like all over the board, like she would never get a vaccine because she just doesn't trust the government, you know, and when I, you know, and I said, but, you know, I don't have to do certain things, or I can do certain things. And, you know, she said, well, you wore a mask when you were told to. And I was like, I wore a mask because I was protecting myself. And guess what? I still wear a mask now, even though the majority of the people don't. And yes, I am fully vaccinated and boosted and whatever, but I'm still wearing a mask because I don't want to get sick.
Yeah.
But if, you know, I think back to when I was in college, and if I had gotten pregnant in college, I wasn't ready to be a mother then, you know, so, And then there are women that, have other medical issues. My best friend had to have a late-term abortion because if she had carried her baby to term, she could have died.
Right.
So it shouldn't be something that's a law that you're forced to do or not to do. It's your body, it's your choice.
And the hypocrisy, again, that we always seem to go back to the hypocrisy of this. So the Supreme Court ruled in a case where members of the armed forces sued the Army or whatever branch of the government, branch of the military they were in, when they were told that they had to get vaccinated.
Mm-hmm.
And the Supreme Court ruled they didn't have to. They had a right to choose.
Right.
If you have a right to choose whether or not you take a vaccine, how do you not have a right to choose whether or not you carry a child to term?
Right.
Isn't carrying that child to full term far more impactful than getting a vaccine?
Right.
Where you would think you would have that option?
And the hypocrisy of it, too, is if men had the ability to carry, now granted, trans men can, I don't want to exclude them, but if these white cis men were at risk of their body harming them, because think about it, when and you've mentioned it numerous times, especially watching me go through childbirth and what happened I ended up having to have an emergency C-section because our daughter was in distress, and you got to see firsthand what my body went through. You've said time and time again, there's no way in hell you would have been able to do that.
Right.
And I bet you if you polled, the majority of men, would you be willing to go through childbirth? Would you be willing to do all these things? No. No, they wouldn't. But yet, you'll put your partner or your wife or your mistress, you'll engage in an act and not have any thought process behind that.
Yeah. The other interesting hypocrisy here is they're forcing women to carry children to full term. Are they forcing the sperm donor to be a father, to be there, to have any level of responsibility?
And that's the thing, is that at the moment of conception, that's when you should be paying child support.
Right. Absolutely.
And you don't get to walk away now.
Yep.
That is now, there were a couple of memes like, Happy Father's Day! You're now going to be a dad because of that one night stand, because you decided, you didn't want to put a condom on.
Right. We're up against the clock here, but I did want to raise one more point. We had talked about it off the air, and I think it's worthwhile mentioning because I think it's a great example. Tell us about the adoption one.
Yeah, let me bring that one up. So this was an interesting,
because I thought this was very poignant.
Yes, this was recently posted and is something for the Supreme Court to consider. Can a 13-year-old girl adopt a baby if she wants to? No, obviously not. Are you nuts? What about a 15-year-old girl? Can she adopt a baby if she feels like it? Nope, absolutely not. All right, how about an 18-year-old girl? Surely she could adopt a baby, right? No, still can't. Well, what if she was 20, no longer a teenager? A 20-year-old can definitely adopt a baby if she feels like it, right? Actually, no. Well, weird. Why not? There are over 400,000 children in foster care, so why can't she adopt at least one of them? She just can't. And you know why? Because you have to qualify to adopt a child. There are rigorous background checks, home visits, proof of financial and mental stability, etc. It's a whole thing, right? But if she is 14 and gets impregnated by an abusive ex-boyfriend who shoved her out of his moving car and left her for dead, she must now carry to term, give birth, just figure it out somehow? Yes, that is correct. But she's only 14. She will figure it out. But she should also have been more careful and made better choices. So, to punish her for her poor choices, we force her into motherhood, which we've established she's totally unqualified for. And now we are suddenly comfortable with a young, traumatized girl caring for a vulnerable, little screaming human being that is wholly reliant on her for survival? Yes, absolutely. Such an unexpected blessing.
And I think that right there sums up the problem. We have standards for what it means to be a qualified parent.
Yep.
We enforce them in one instance in adoption. We ignore them completely in every other instance.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else to be said on the matter at this point?
Vote.
Yep.
Stay angry. Let your voice be heard.
That is the only silver lining I see here, is that they're forcing this onto the states, which means your elected leaders will now not be able to hide behind a Supreme Court decision. Mm-hmm. They're going to have to go on record on the voting roll call on whether or not they support this. And unlike the Supreme Court justices, the 3 Supreme Court justices that Trump appointed, who all said on the record that they would not overturn Roe versus Wade, and they did,
right?
You can hold these politicians accountable by voting them out of office.
Absolutely. The other thing, too, is I've seen people posting, I currently live in a red state. I need to move. I had another friend whose children are getting ready to go to college and have now changed which schools they're considering now.
If only we could impeach Supreme Court justices for perjuring themselves during their confirmation hearings.
And that's something, that's making the rounds. So
that's all we had today. Did you have anything else before we go?
Resist.
There you go. Before we do go, I did want to once again invite our listening and viewing audience to subscribe to the podcast. You can find audio versions of this podcast listed as Insights into Tomorrow. Video and audio of all the network's podcasts can be found listed as Insights into Things. We're available on Apple, Spotify, Google, Stitcher, anywhere you can get a podcast. We would also ask you to write in, give us your feedback, tell us how we're doing, give us your topics you'd like us to discuss. You can email us at comments@insightsintothings.com.
You can find us on Twitter at twitter.com/insights_things.
We do stream 5 days a week on Twitch at twitch.tv/insightsintothings.
You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/insightsintothingspodcast.
You can find high resolutions of all of our video on YouTube at youtube.com/insightsintothings.
You can find us on Instagram at instagram.com/insightsintothings.
Where you can find links to all this and more on our official website at www.insightsintothings.com. That's it. Another one in the books.
Have a good week, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
For over 7 years, The Second Sith Empire has been the premier community guild in the online game Star Wars: The Old Republic. With hundreds of friendly and helpful active members, a weekly schedule of nightly events, annual guild meet and greets, and an active community both on the web and on Discord. The Second Sith Empire is more than your typical gaming group. We're family. Join us on the Starforge server for nightly events such as operations, flashpoints, world boss hunts, Star Wars trivia, guild lottery, and much more. Visit us on the web today at www.thesecondsithempire.com.
Insightful podcasts by informative hosts. Insights into Things, a podcast network. Welcome to Insights into Teens, a podcast series exploring the issues and challenges of today's youth. Your hosts are Joseph and Madison Whalen, a father and daughter team making their way through the challenges of the teenage years.
Welcome to Insights into Teens. This is episode 150, People Say the Strangest Things. I'm your host, Joseph Whalen, and my creative and ever-curious co-host, Madison Whalen.
Hi everyone, I don't think we've used ever creative before, so that's cool.
Always trying to come up with something new here.
Nice.
So how we doing today, Maddie?
I'm doing alright.
You just got some news, didn't you? What was that news?
The fact that I ended up being the highest grade point average in my freshman class.
Woohoo! Good for you.
And how we magically got like 5 other kids after the last time.
Well, yeah, we're not gonna look but that's even better because you got 5 more people you were competing against there. Congratulations.
Yep.
What are we talking about today? Oh, that camera angle's really bad there. All right, we'll have to fix that.
Are we gonna cut this out?
No. We'll be fine. What are we talking about today? We'll just go to a different camera angle. See, if we do that, we fix the problem. No, that's still there. We go.
There we go.
So what are we talking about? We are talking about funny things in the English language. Now, before I go on my summary spiel here, this was an idea you came up with. What was the impetus for this? Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, first of all, it's our 150th episode, and really, I wanted to do something special for it. I didn't want to just do a regular podcast for it. It's not as big as like 100 and 200, but like it's kind of one of those middle milestones, and I kind of wanted to do something fun. I thought a regular Q&A really wouldn't work all that well, and then I came up with the idea when me and Mommy were kind of talking with each other, and the idea, and me and her would talk during lunch, and during a certain lunchtime, I was like, hey, were there any things like your teachers told you that like seemed fine as a kid, but now aren't really all that fine or don't really make all that much sense? And then I wanted to try turning that into a podcast because I thought it could be interesting for us to kind of talk about certain sayings that like we're told that technically aren't really true. And then it kind of morphed into, okay, we're going to include some other stuff into that because we can't really do an entire podcast based on specifically the topic I wanted to discuss. And really it was kind of a lot of, we kind of have to figure out how to work with this because I really wanted to turn it into a podcast, and here we are now.
Yeah, and as I was doing the research for it, I started coming across a whole bunch of different things that I thought might work. So we'll give it a shot, see how it works. So the English language is a funny thing. While words and phrases can have different meanings in different cultures, there are other things that might affect the meaning or even the relevance of a word or phrase. Sometimes these things that once had meaning in the past are no longer relevant because of changes in society. This can sometimes conjure misconceptions or misunderstandings. Other times, a phrase changes so much that the true meaning of the phrase itself is lost, while other phrases are often misheard, misunderstood, or just murder the English language, kind of like when you hear the wrong lyrics of a song, which might be a podcast in the future for us. On today's episode of Insights into Teens, we're going to take a look at a few of the phrases that stand out to us. We'll shed some light on them, alleviate some misconceptions, and maybe even entertain you along the way. But before we do that, though, I do want to invite our listening and viewing audience to subscribe to the podcast. You can find audio versions of this podcast listed as Insights into Teens. You can also find video and audio versions of the podcast and all of our podcasts listed as Insights into Things. And you can find them anywhere you can get a regular podcast these days. I'd also like to invite you to give us your feedback on what we're talking about or give us your suggestions for show topics. You can email us at comments@insightsintothings.com, or you can visit us on the web at our official website and get links to pretty much all of our social media at www.insightsintothings.com. Ready?
Yep.
Here we go. So the first thing we're going to talk about are sayings that just aren't true anymore. And this is sort of what started off with the whole podcast idea when you're having your discussion. There are sayings in our society that are repeated often enough that they're almost written in our memories. They often reflect how society behaved at one point in time, but through changes in our society and acceptable behavior, they've largely lost their meaning. While they may not be relevant to today's society, they do serve to give us a glimpse as to how things were in the not-too-distant past. In fact, I remember many of these being the normal, acceptable societal behaviors when I was a kid. So here's a few. The first one, back then, we'll say, was snitching is wrong. Well, today, snitching, or at least telling an adult about something that other students are doing because, oh, sorry, I missed a line.
Yeah.
Line, please. Snitching, or at least telling an adult something that other students are going through because they won't say anything, can help kids stay out of trouble and can also prevent acts of bullying and abuse of a kid, and abuse a kid is facing who's too scared to speak out. There are more benefits to snitching. There are more benefits to snitching now than drawbacks. Boy, that was a hard one to get through.
I don't know how that was hard for you to get
I don't
through.
know. What else do we have?
We have one that kind of was a major one for me, is that, well, in my scenario, if a boy is mean to a girl, it means he likes her. The thing is now, this really isn't true. If a person likes you, they wouldn't be actively hurting you. The main problem resides in the fact that it also glorifies the act of bullying by painting it as an act of love. While bullying can severely damage someone's self-esteem and can lead to mental health issues like depression, it can cause these issues to escalate even further.
See, even you stumbled there.
Just because I said a word wrong. It's not like I skipped
It wasn't like you said a whole paragraph wrong. I know, thanks. What else do we have?
We also had, then, people would say it's rude to ask people about their disability. Now, knowledge is pretty much power at this point. While some people might not like others bringing up their disability, it can be a good learning opportunity for kids who don't have a disability to know how it can affect the life of a person that does. And it's a great opportunity for them to learn that they can still live a normal life, like a kid that didn't have the disability can too.
In air quotes.
I don't like calling it a disability.
You have to call it something, right? What else was there to call it? I don't know what else you would call it.
Yeah.
People used to call it a handicap, but it's really not a handicap. So I don't know what the proper term is. Maybe that's something we could do a little research on.
Yeah.
So then they used to say, you need to find love in order to settle down and be happy. Well, that's not really the case. There are people who never get married or date that live perfectly content single lives. They could be living on their own, with friends and roommates, or with pets and have a well-paying job and a good home as well as hobbies that they enjoy, along with connections that aren't romantic. And that's absolutely true. Back then, they used to say the only purpose in school is to get a good get into a good college. Well, today I think we all realize that even though a lot of what we do in high school pushes us towards college, the college isn't for everyone. People can still get well-paying jobs without a college degree.
Just ask my dad.
There you go. Moving right along.
Now this one, then, this one's still kind of one that I feel people still kind of talk about, but is now starting to get a bit more traction, is that boys don't cry. Boys absolutely cry.
Especially when you kick them in the shins.
So, this undermines the emotions of men, saying that because you're a guy, you need to put on a masculine exterior, because otherwise you're seen as weak. However, a guy experiencing emotions and seeking help is incredibly strong. They are willing to try and deal with their emotions, and they took a large step seeking for help. These men tend to be stronger than men that actually normally ooze toxic masculinity.
Toxic masculinity. I like that phrase. It sounds like a perfume or men's cologne. What are you wearing? Toxic masculinity.
I mean, it goes great with the grenade, bomb, obsidian.
There you go.
Other textures.
Axe. I wear axe. What do you wear? Toxic masculinity.
Yeah. Another one that people are starting to bring into question is, ironically, that kids shouldn't question an adult. Newsflash, adults are wrong all the time.
Not all the time. Sometimes I'm right.
I mean, just check Twitter.
I was right yesterday.
All right, fine. Telling kids not to question adults is how we don't expand and learn. Questioning something is what makes kids smarter and helps them to find flaws and try to fix them.
There you go. Failure is bad. Not to be confused with failure is not an option. That was a movie line that was never actually said in real life. We know failure isn't bad. We've said before on the podcast, failure and mistakes are learning opportunities. If you fail at something, it's okay. Learn why you failed and learn how not to repeat it. We learn more from our failures than our successes. I'm going to copyright that because I'm pretty sure that's our trademark on this podcast here.
At this point, kind of.
Complaining is the same as not being grateful. Criticism can also be categorized as complaining, and in that case, it's certainly not the same thing as ungrateful. While certain forms of complaining can be seen as ungrateful, it's unfair to label complaining in general the same as not being grateful. Outwardly expressing discontent at something can help us improve, and most of the time isn't directly being ungrateful. Now, we did a podcast on complaining and how to complain. Complaining, it might sound comical, and I'm not cracking a joke, but complaining is an important part of society. Things don't get fixed if you don't complain about them. Nobody complains when everything's working fine.
Yeah.
Case in point, there was a water main that broke in Philadelphia. It was on the news today. And that water main was put in like 1896 or something like that. And it's worked fine until it stopped working. And nobody complained about it when people were getting leaks here and leaks there. Well, when it fails catastrophically and it floods like dozens of homes and ruins vehicles and streets and cars and there's millions of dollars in damage, well, it's not working now. So now we're going to complain about it. Well, had someone complained about it before, they would have replaced that 100-and-some-year-old water pipe. Nothing gets fixed if you don't complain about it.
Yeah, ironically.
What else do we have?
The next one is specifically tended to direct towards men, and it's that you shouldn't hit a woman.
That's not true. Women hit women, too.
Well, yeah, but, the main point is that you shouldn't hit anyone. Violence isn't the answer in any case. It is marketing the stereotype that women are fragile and a man shouldn't hurt them. But again, you really just shouldn't hurt anyone.
Amen to that.
Another common one that's still said today is that practice makes perfect. And that's the thing. Perfection is an unrealistic expectation for practicing. What practice will really give you is progress. You'll never get perfect at something, even if you practice it. You'll get better, you just won't be perfect.
I love that phrase. Practice gives you progress. That's another one that I think we should copy right here. That's going to be us. That works.
All right.
Boys will be boys. Now, there's a lot of different meanings to that in today's society, but specifically what we're talking about is the fact that this is a sexist remark focusing on the typical stereotype of boys that they're always trying to start trouble. Assuming that all boys are, quote, the same, it's ridiculous considering everyone is different. And just because many boys may cause trouble doesn't mean it's the case for every boy. And part of this goes back to the fact that in high school, in grade school, whatever, boys mature at a different rate than girls do. Mm-hmm. So the boys tend to mentally mature later in puberty than the girls do. So as a result of that, they get this stigmatism that they're always causing trouble. So there's some truth behind it, but it's not quite what it used to be. And this is one that you love. You should smile more. Okay. This philosophy causes more problems than it solves. It's a blatant attempt to deprioritize mental illness and is basically like saying, even though you aren't happy, you should appear so for other people's benefit. It furthers the idea that people need to hide their emotional problems from society in order to be accepted and function properly. And it encourages people not to seek help if they do have problems. And the one thing that we're big on here is find the help that you need. It's out there. Find it. Don't hide it. Accept what you are and who you are. And what's the last one we have?
Well, we have two more.
We do? Oh, we do. Look at that. I didn't scroll all the way down.
It's fine. So a common phrase you'll still technically hear nowadays is that, oh, you'll understand when you have kids. So where to even start? For one, you're assuming that in the future, the child you're speaking to will eventually have kids, even though not everyone dreams of having them or even really suited to take care of a child. Two, you assume that every parent experiences the same thing. Parenting is a complicated experience that, while people can relate to certain parts, is different for everyone. Teens who later have kids more than likely will have a different experience being a parent than you.
I will say, being a parent, that my perspective on this is kind of biased because there are things that give me perspective in life as a parent that I could honestly say I would never experience if I didn't have kids. Now, the fact that you're kind of telling people you're being derogatory in that you're saying you'll never understand this until you have kids. Meaning, well, they need to have kids. That's the part, I think, of the statement that's the problem.
Yeah, I figured that would more than likely be the main problem, assuming that, like, oh, everybody's gonna have kids, so everybody has to have that experience or something.
Right. There are things that we as individuals will never understand without experiencing them. And there are lots of things that we don't want to experience. You know, I'll never know, hopefully, I'll never know what it's like to be in, like, a nuclear blast. But there are people that are alive today that have survived that know what it's like. You know, I'll never know what it's like to be slim and in shape. But there are people that know that. You know, so there are certain things that if you don't go through those experiences, it's very difficult to understand them. I can imagine, I can sympathize, or I can empathize with you. But, you know, one of the other ones that I was going to put in here was, you know, the phrase that parents just don't understand. And they don't, and it's very similar to this one. You're going through something similar to what I went through, maybe, but not the same. So I don't understand what you're going through. I understand what I went through. And perhaps in conveying that and how I dealt with it, it might help you to deal with what you're going through. So not everyone goes through the same experiences, but this one here, I think the real problem is you're assuming they're going to have kids, and I think that assumption is where we take exception.
Yeah.
And now for the last one. That was the penultimate last one. This is the last one.
This last one I technically have more of an experience with, and that is the saying that you're really good for a girl. Now, this one is not really all that hard to figure out. I botched that.
Yes, not just me.
It's sexist for pointing out the stereotype that girls are weaker than boys, which in many cases really isn't true. And I've had a personal experience with this, it wasn't really directed at me, but it sort of followed the lines of this. And I've mentioned this on the podcast before, but it was during my physics class where ironically I was the only girl in the room. And the substitute teacher was talking to some of the boys in the background, again not directed towards me. But the boys did something, and the teacher said that, I've seen girls that are stronger than you, or something along those lines. And yeah, I didn't really. It was kind of shocking to me. Yeah, because it's like.
And for the record, it was a substitute teacher.
Yeah,
it wasn't your regular physics teacher. She took care of it though.
Yep.
Literally, like she came back, man, and she took care of that with a vengeance. So kudos to her for that. Yeah,
so I've personally had experience with this, and like, it doesn't seem, well, nowadays it kind of seems harmless. No, nowadays it seems more harmful. But like, it used to be one of those sayings that nobody really cared about until like recently. And I really hope that this kind of goes away.
Yeah, I think a lot of these need to kind of go away. And that like these types of things are statements that lead to mistreatment. Like, for instance, that statement alone, I can remember growing up as a kid, and people would get picked for teams, and they'd always pick the girls last because the boys didn't want the girls on their team. And it's like, well, you know, some of the girls here are much better than some of the boys. Just because they're girls doesn't mean they shouldn't get picked.
Yeah.
And I'm in the process of doing research for a new Insights into Tomorrow episode where we're going to talk about fundamental women's rights and how they progressed and so forth. And it was an eye-opener to see how slow things have progressed over time. There's small leaps and then no progress at all. And then now certain things are being regressed back to where they were before. And it's unfortunate because I don't think any segment of the population deserves that kind of treatment. And when you say something like that where comparing someone to a girl is meant to be derogatory, you clearly don't understand women. You don't understand how capable girls can be if you're going to make a statement like that.
And it's the same thing even with when it comes to the boys. A lot of the times when you see that, it's either undermining the fact that all boys are the same with the fact that they are troublemakers and the fact that they mature later on than girls do. And also, society tends to undermine the fact of men's mental health.
Absolutely.
So, honestly, it can go both ways. With women, they're being undermined. With men, they're not allowed to express their emotions like women are.
Yeah, there are prejudices that are built into society, and some of these phrases kind of highlight those prejudices. And even though they're just words have an effect. You know, they have an effect today. These are phrases that are decades old that still have an effect today. And I think the important takeaway from, I guess, this initial discussion is be mindful of what you say, because what you say has an effect on people. And that effect ripples out. You know, what you say today has an effect, you know, in the long term on that person, who that person interacts with, and who they interact with. Set a good example.
Yeah, and I also kind of thought of another common phrase that people say is that actions speak louder than words. But words can still speak, really loudly to people. You can get, a small compliment from, someone can give you a small compliment and you just feel amazing from it. Or someone can just say something so hurtful that...
And that's the thing, it's a double-edged sword, right? So on one hand, you can compliment someone, lift them up, inspire them to do great things, and in the next breath, you could say something derogatory to someone and tear them down and you know, give them a level of anxiety that just isn't warranted. Anyway, I think we're going to take a break here. We're going to come back and we're going to talk about some sayings that have lost their original meanings. We'll be right back.
For over 7 years, the Second Sith Empire has been the premier community guild in the online game Star Wars: The Old Republic. With hundreds of friendly and helpful active members, a weekly schedule of nightly events, annual guild meet and greets, and an active community both on the web and on Discord. The Second Sith Empire is more than your typical gaming group. We're family. Join us on the Starforge server for nightly events such as operations, flashpoints, world boss hunts, Star Wars trivia, guild lottery, and much more. Visit us on the web today at www.thesecondsithempire.com.
Welcome back to Insights into Teens. Today we're talking about people say the strangest things. And now we're going to discuss sayings that have lost their original meaning. There are a lot of popular phrases that we use on a daily basis to convey simple meanings or life lessons. Some of these are pretty old and over time have changed. They've been shortened or may reference things that don't exist anymore. Some of these have mutated so much that the meaning we attribute them today may be completely different from what they were originally intended to convey. Here's a few examples. So the current saying we have is one that's incredibly popular, is that curiosity killed the cat. With the current meaning, basically meaning, you should not try to find out about something which doesn't concern you. The original saying is actually much longer, saying, curiosity killed the cat, but satisfaction brought it back. The original phrase warns against diving too deep into a needless investigation, but the later amendment, first recorded in American newspapers sometime in the early 1900s, plays on the trope of cat's 9 lives to change the meaning. Here, there's pleasure in finding out something you really want to know.
That's interesting. So another one that we hear a lot is great minds think alike. So the current meaning, as we understand it, is used to emphasize a coincidence, or two people reaching the same conclusion in a manner at the same time. So you and I say the same thing. We say, oh, great minds think alike. Well, the original saying is, again, a little bit longer. It says, great minds think alike, though fools seldom differ. The etymology of the phrase is mostly unknown, but it's meant to suggest it's foolish people, not great minds, that are more likely to have the same banal thoughts all the time.
Another one that's commonly used is that blood is thicker than water, meaning a person's family is more important than a person's other relationship or needs. The original saying actually has way more words mixed in with the original words, saying the blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb. Basically meaning a chosen blood covenant provides a stronger bond than any family.
So the friends or the associates that you bond to you choose. You don't get to choose your family, you get to choose your friends, and it's that bond that's stronger.
So it's basically the exact opposite of the original saying.
Yeah, which is funny. Some of these are like that. This is another good one. Money is the root of all evil, which means greed is the cause of a particular problem or the cause of society's problems in general. Well, the original saying is actually a Bible text that says, for the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. Now, when you take it like this, both the full original quote and the shortened common version originate from the Bible that warns against greed, but reading the full version of the quote doesn't completely change the meaning of the one we all know best, but it might shift your perspective a bit. It really means having money isn't a problem. It's wanting money that's the problem or that's sinful. So again, it's another shift in the meaning of what the original phrase was.
Then we have Jack of all trades, master of none, meaning a person who can do many things but is not an expert at any of them. The original saying is longer, like some of these typically are. Jack of all trades, master of none, though oftentimes better than the master of one. This saying has been through a lot. It begins as simply Jack of all trades, and a most flattering term for a generalist who has honed many skills. Later, master of none was added on to change the phrase to something slightly derogatory, suggesting that the Jack of all trades doesn't know much at all. The shady two-part phrase is what most know and use today, but at some point it was amended again to check the haters. The full phrase says something like, I know a little about a lot of things, and that's better than having a limited skill set any day.
Much more complicated than originally thought.
Yep.
The last one that we have in this particular category is an old adage that says, starve a cold, feed a fever. I think everybody's heard that one. And today's meaning means that fasting is the right way to treat a cold. Well, the original quote is, if you starve a cold, you'll have to feed a fever, which really means if you fast during a cold, you'll be even sicker longer, and you'll wind up getting the fever. So eat during the cold. So it's interesting how some of these things, and this is just kind of a handful of examples of what these phrases are and how the English language has changed around these things, that they've got completely different meanings. Can you think of anything else that we might not have talked about?
These are all like really good ones.
The other ones that come to mind to me are nursery rhymes. Like a great one that nobody ever really knew the meaning to was Ring Around the Rosie.
Oh, yeah.
What is the meaning of that?
I know it has to do about the bubonic plague and the fact that you would get like rings on, like basically I think it was something on your skin. They made it look like
right.
Red rings.
So when you got the bubonic plague, you would get what are called buboses, which is where the term bubonic plague came from. and you'd get round sores on your hands that would have red rings, rash around them. So you would have the rings there. People would carry, because they didn't understand where the germs came from, they would carry rose petals in their pockets, and they would sniff the rose petals thinking that that would help to ward off the evil spirits that were causing it. So you'd have rings around the rosies, and then the term, everyone sings it as ashes fall down. It's actually ashes, as if you're sneezing, because you would get rings around the rosies, you would sneeze, you would fall, and you would die. So it's really a morbid, terrible nursery rhyme if you listen to it and you attribute the meaning.
And then I want to put another example out. I don't entirely know the origins of it, but it kind of gets creepy when you kind of look into it more and more, is Humpty Dumpty. You know, about the little egg that fell off the brick wall, the king's horses and men couldn't put them back together. But it gets really creepy when you realize that it didn't specify that Humpty was an egg.
Yeah.
So it makes you think.
Yeah, that's more, but that's very similar to the Grimm's fairy tales, which all your Disney princess fairy tales are really based off of. But if you go back and read the Grimm's fairy tales, there's no such thing as a happy ending there.
Yeah, the best example I can give is The Little Mermaid, where instead of just giving up the voice and the happy, friendly kid manner that Disney put it out, she literally cut off her tongue.
Right. So the Grimm's fairy tales were very dark, and somehow Disney thought they were good inspirations for a nice little happy ending kid stories where everyone lives happily ever after.
Snow White's ending is probably the one that scared me the most.
Well, we won't go into that here because it is pretty morbid.
Yeah.
So anyway, just another example of how English language and the phrases that we think we know might have different meanings. So we're going to take our last break. We're going to come back and we'll talk about what I describe as some head-scratching phrases. We'll be right back.
For over 7 years, the Second Sith Empire has been the premier community guild in the online game Star Wars: The Old Republic. With hundreds of friendly and helpful active members, a weekly schedule of nightly events, annual guild meet and greets, and an active community both on the web and on Discord. The Second Sith Empire is more than your typical gaming group. We're family. Join us on the Starforge server for nightly events such as operations, flashpoints, world boss hunts, Star Wars trivia, guild lottery, and much more. Visit us on the web today at www.thesecondsithempire.com.
Welcome back to Insights into Teens. Today we're talking about people say the strangest things. And now we're going to talk about head-scratching phrases. Now there are some phrases that have been passed down over the years that simply don't make sense. They seem contradictory to themselves. Some are just simple misquotes that have carried forward like the wrong lyrics of a song. Here are a few examples. The first one we have is a very common one, meaning by the saying same difference. But the thing is, why are you comparing differences? Why wouldn't you just say same thing?
Right.
And this is a saying that I've been using that I know that you have been, criticizing me on. It's one of the phrases. I'm interested to see if you also put the other phrase that I used to say that I'm not saying anymore. If not, I'm gonna mention it. Then we have, I don't disagree with you. But doesn't that mean you actually agree with me? If you do, just say that you agree. It sounds much more positive and upbeat rather than, oh yeah, I don't disagree with you.
I had a guy I worked with years ago, and he never agreed with anybody. And he was such a I'm going to say disagreeable person, but like he was argumentative and abrasive, and like nobody liked the guy because he never had anything nice to say. The nicest thing he would say is, well, I don't disagree with it. So then you agree with me, right? No, I just don't disagree with you. He just, on principle, wouldn't agree with people. And it was just driving everybody crazy. That's why that one made this list. And yes, your same difference one made the list too. The other one didn't, though. I know which one you're talking about.
Dang it.
The one that I hear a lot that, again,
I still kind of say
drives
it as
me
well.
crazy. I could care less. Oh, well, so then you care some, right? Because if you can care less, you have some caring to give.
Yeah.
But most people probably don't think that that's what they're trying to convey. When most people say this, they're trying to convey a lack of caring about something. So you probably want to say something like, I couldn't care less.
Or just say, I could care more. I mean,
Okay, I'm not sure that gets the point across either, but sure. The other one, and this one is just really people not knowing the English language, is that point's mute. It's not mute. Now, it could be mute if you're making a point and it, quote, falls on deaf ears. Then it's mute. That means you can't hear it. But most people are trying to convey a lack of meaning or significance of the point being made, so they probably mean it's moot, meaning having little or no practical relevance. What else do we have?
we also have for all intensive purposes. While there's technically nothing wrong with this phrase, it's probably not what you mean when you use it. This would mean something like, for all purposes that require a lot of effort in a short time. What you probably mean is for all intents and purposes, meaning that one thing has the same effect or result as something else. You also have another one being, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. This is a phrase that would have lived well under our previous segment. Oh wait, no, that is fit.
Fit, yeah, I don't know where you get live there.
I don't know.
You got an eye,
I said
that's
lift. This is a phrase that would have fit well under our previous segment because it's one that's changed its meaning over time. Originally meant to convey an attempt to do something absurd, it changed sometime in the 1920s and evolved into an expression related to doing something without outside help.
Do you know what bootstraps are, by the way?
Not really.
So on boots, there's hooks on either side, on like cowboy boots and stuff like that. And you're supposed to put your fingers in there so you can pull the boots up. That's a bootstrap. Imagine trying to lift yourself up by your bootstraps. It's physically impossible to do so.
Yes.
So, hence why it was meant to convey something absurd. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it. Meaning not to worry about a possible problem until it actually happens. The phrase itself is kind of silly when you think about it. You can't very well cross a bridge until you come to it. So you can't do it beforehand. So it's kind of silly the way it is. But again, it's one of those absurd statements there to prove a point.
Yeah.
The other one I love is, I got the wrong end of the stick. This is another curious saying that probably doesn't hold up too well today. What in the world are you doing with your sticks that you have a right end of a stick and a wrong end of a stick? You're poking at someplace you shouldn't be at that point, I think.
Then we have the phrase, head over heels in love. Most people usually have their head over their heels when they're upright. Why would this have anything to do with falling in love?
Yeah, I love that.
It's another one that confuses me. Love has a lot of weird sayings, and this is probably one of the ones that most people normalize, but when you think about it, it's probably one of the weirder ones.
Yeah.
Then you have, you can't have your cake and eat it too. In fact, the only way you can eat your cake is to first have it, otherwise you wouldn't be able to eat it. And what's the point of having cake if you aren't going to eat it?
Amen to that. And here's one that doesn't probably mean the same thing, but a little bird told me. Now this one finally makes sense in the age of Twitter, because a lot of birds tell me a lot of things on Twitter these days. And I can only imagine back in the day that this was a phrase that a pirate would say, referring to his parrot whispering in his ear or something like that, you know?
I mean, that'd be kind of funny if it was.
Yeah, exactly.
Make that in the new Pirates of the Caribbean movie.
There you go. And here's another one that goes with the previous one I had. More than you can shake a stick at it. Well, there we go with the sticks again. Why are we shaking sticks at anything? And how can you possibly have too many of something to shake a stick at? I don't get that.
Now we have time heals all wounds. Unless, of course, they're fatal wounds.
Then it doesn't matter how much time you have there.
Yeah. Then you have another one of the love thing, is that love makes the world go round. Sure, if by love you mean gravity and inertia. Science.
There's more than one way to skin a cat. I don't even want to imagine how this phrase came about.
Yeah, neither do I.
There has to be a better alternative to express there's many ways to achieve a goal than skinning cats.
Yeah, I don't think that's something that most people would like to imagine.
No. And the last one that we have here is you're one of a kind. Well, fortunately, since human cloning is still illegal, we're all one of a kind. Even identical twins are unique individuals. So again, there was a whole slew of these that kind of came out of my research. These were the ones that kind of stuck out. What was the one you were thinking of?
The one I was thinking of is needless to say.
Yes.
And then you would always go on saying, if it's needless to say, you don't need to say it.
Exactly. If it's needless to say, why are you saying it?
Yeah.
So there's lots of stuff out there. Can you think of anything else off the top of your head? I used to have, in fact, my mentor when I was working an early job here, a brilliant man, got along with him great, was an Indian gentleman named Deepak. Had a lot of respect for him. He used to say, and it was partially his accent, but it was a phrase that he would say all the time, unless incidental. And I was like, what does that mean? What are you saying? Because he would say it so fast. And eventually I realized it wasn't unless incidental. He was saying unless and until. And it took me like 3 years of working with the man to figure out what exactly he was saying there. And I'm like, oh, okay, that kind of makes sense now. But he used it all the time.
How about love makes the world blind, or love makes people blind, or whatever that...
Well, love is blind.
Oh, love is blind.
Love is blind. Justice is blind too, but justice and love don't really go together too well.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of silly things, and it's like there's a etymology, an origin to a lot of these phrases that has just been lost over time as to why these things make any sense at all. It's raining cats and dogs. At what point was that ever a thing?
Oh yeah, idioms. Break a leg as in an encouraging way. Do
Right.
well. It's like, when you're telling someone to break their leg, it doesn't sound like you're trying to encourage them.
Or our version of when you're going to a comic book show, break a rib. Anyway, I think that's a good note to stop on there.
Or in the case of marching band, break your knees.
Break your knees. There you go. Anyway, so yeah, today was just we're marking the 150th. We've been doing a couple of hard-hitting ones, so it was nice to just sort of unwind and have a little bit of fun with this one today. I don't think we're coming back with any closing thoughts. I don't really think there's any closing thoughts or shout-outs to do.
Probably not.
So we'll just, barrel right on through here and once again invite our listening and viewing audience to subscribe to the podcast. You can get audio versions listed as Insights into Teens. Audio and video versions of all of our podcasts can be found listed as Insights into Things on Apple, Spotify, Google, Stitcher, etc., etc. We'd also invite you to reach out, contact us, give us your feedback, email us at comments@insightsintothings.com, hit us on Twitter at insights_things. You can find high-res versions of our videos on YouTube at youtube.com/insightsintothings. We do stream 5 days a week on Twitch at twitch.tv/insightsintothings. You can also find us on Facebook at facebook.com/Insights Into Things Podcast, or you can get links to all those and much more on our official website at www.insightsintothings.com. And you.
And don't forget to check out our other two podcasts, Insights into Entertainment, hosted by you and Mommy, and Into Cinema Tomorrow, our monthly podcast, hosted by you and my brother Sam.
Except this week when we're switching hosts of the two shows and trying something new out.
Yeah, should I rephrase what I just said?
Nah, that's good enough.
All right.
Typically, that's who the hosts are, but we're going to change things up a little bit. We've got some interesting topics that we're bringing special hosts in, we'll say, for in this case here. But anyway, that's it. Another one in the books.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
For over 7 years, the Second Sith Empire has been the premier community guild in the online game Star Wars: The Old Republic. With hundreds of friendly and helpful active members, a weekly schedule of nightly events, annual guild meet and greets, and an active community both on the web and on Discord. The Second Sith Empire is more than your typical gaming group. We're family. Join us on the Starforge server for nightly events such as operations, flashpoints, world boss hunts, Star Wars trivia, guild lottery, and much more. Visit us on the web today at www.thesecondsithempire.com.
Insightful podcasts by informative hosts. Insights into Things, a podcast network. Welcome to Insights into Entertainment, a podcast series taking a deeper look into entertainment and media. Your hosts, Joseph and Michelle Whalen, a husband and wife team of pop culture fanatics, are exploring all things from music and movies to television and fandom.
Welcome to Insights into Entertainment. This is episode 145. Help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi. I'm your host, Joseph Whalen, and my special guest host today is Sam Whalen, host of our Insights into Tomorrow podcast.
Hello there.
How you doing, Sam?
Good. How are you doing?
Good. Thank you for joining us today. So this discussion kind of came about. You know, we've been itching to have this discussion for quite some time now. We've finished the Obi-Wan series now, so we can finally have the whole conversation. So today we're going to discuss the current state of Star Wars. Believe it or not, we're actually coming up on the 10th anniversary of Disney taking over Lucasfilm. We'll take a look at how the franchise has progressed since Disney took ownership and what their stewardship looks like. Then we'll take a deep dive into the properties that have come out recently and the trend towards streaming. We'll give our thoughts and opinions on Obi-Wan, and then we'll take a look at what the current forecasted future of the franchise looks like and where we think it's going. But before we do that, though, I would invite our listening and viewing audience to subscribe to the podcast. You can find audio versions of this podcast listed as Insights into Entertainment. Both video and audio can be found on all of the network's podcasts, listed as Insights into Things, and we can be found anywhere you get a podcast, Google, Spotify, and so forth. We'd also invite you to write in, give us your feedback, tell us how we're doing, give us your suggestions. You can email us at comments@insightsintothings.com or check out our official website at www.insightsintothings.com. for all of our social media links. Ready to get into it?
Yeah, before we get into it, full spoilers for everything. So if you haven't seen the new sequel movies, if you haven't seen Obi-Wan, we're going full spoilers, just so you know.
All right, good warning there. Here we go. So Disney's trying to get their money's worth from the franchise. So we all know that back in 2012 or thereabouts, Disney basically bought Lucasfilm for about a little over $4 billion. They wanted to quickly capitalize on this by putting out their own trilogy, which kind of worked out for them, I guess. We'll get into that later. So they put out the first film in 2015 with Force Awakens. That brought in $2 billion. At the time, it was the highest grossing film in Disney history, which was kind of impressive. Then we got that complete mess of a movie, Last Jedi, in 2017.
People are hard on that. It's not that bad, guys. Come on.
Then they finished murdering the franchise in 2019 with Rise of Skywalker.
That one's pretty bad. I don't enjoy that movie.
Hey, the one thing about Rise of Skywalker is you didn't have Luke Skywalker milking any unusually unattractive animals.
That's what the people wanted.